Under the starry sky, a person screams as an axe flies towards them. Quickly, the weapon delivers a fatal blow to that person. The one responsible for the strike is a man with long black hair who eliminated his adversary. An old man asks if the enemy has gone to the other world, and the younger man asks if the elder cannot see. Promptly, the other replies that his vision abandoned him a long time ago. The weary, long-haired man says that it is unfortunate. Then he walks towards the old man. Kneeling in front of him, he says that everything is done, thus receiving praise from the elder. But the young man assumes that the old man also deserves more praise. The cult of lust was so strong that it could paint the central districts with blood, which led all factions to unite against them. Our protagonist looks back, seeing that he has successfully completed his battle against lust, but he knows that his life will soon come to an end. His companion asks if the protagonist is okay, and the man replies that he is for now. Soon, the old man says that the unorthodox sect will not survive without its supreme leader. Our wounded hero ends up saying that the Orthodox Alliance would have been wiped out of the district if it weren't for the elder. With a loose laugh, the man ends up saying that it was all because of him, who is Yeon Hojong, also known as the Black Emperor. But still, there is something that this old man wants to question the young man about, leaving him confused. The elder knows that the protagonist was chosen as the successor of the Orthodox factions, but still, he preferred to become the leader of the unorthodox faction. Soon, the Black Emperor falls silent. Then he explained that things happened because of this. The old man is not impressed and then reveals that his death will arrive in 8 minutes, and the younger man assumes that he will stay by his side until the end. While they both talk, a third person ends up rising with a needle sheathed in a purple aura. Then the leader of the Mirim Alliance ends up saying not to hold any grudges, and that man prepares himself. Thus, he throws the needle, which strikes directly at our protagonist's chest. Feeling pain, our hero ends up letting out a groan, realizing then that it is an acupuncture needle. The purple aura of the individual begins to dissipate, and our protagonist realizes that Tang Quan didn't die as he had thought. The elder asks him to understand, as who would stop him if he died. Then the same man assumes he will apologize in the afterlife, and therefore he will go ahead, wishing to see him again in the future. Our protagonist on the ground ends up asking why he did that, since he would die anyway, and realizes that he will die suffering. 26 years ago, the protagonist ended up witnessing the end of his clan, and his father died along with his brother. He was left alone under the skies in the central districts without a single being to trust. In the end, he ended up heading to the unorthodox factions and managed to rise in rank until becoming the leader, thus demonstrating how desperately he fought to survive. But now the man can only writhe on the ground while groaning in pain, assuming that it was all in vain. And even his last moments of life were filled with immense pain and betrayal. In complete darkness, he ends up hearing some Buddhist teachings and wonders if this is the afterlife, until he ends up opening his eyes, seeing someone in front of him. He recognizes that person as a chief priest, noticing that they seem strangely familiar. Then he questions if this is a dream or some kind of hallucination, until a sudden touch along the call catches his attention. He turns his now youthful face towards the touch, seeing a boy by his side saying that these are the ancestral rites, and therefore he must sit since the father is watching them. Surprise is visible in his eyes for a moment, thus recognizing that person as Jip Yang. Immediately afterward, he shouts his name and jumps on the boy, giving him a hug. The younger one ends up confused, as this is not something normal, but our protagonist realizes that his brother, who died over 20 years ago, is there now, until suddenly a call of his old name ends up echoing. Then he manages to recognize that voice. So he turns around and calls out to his father, seeing the old man who raised him behind him. Confusion ends up settling on his face once again. Soon the protagonist ends up running towards him, shouting for the man who gave him life. But soon the elder ends up holding his hand. The young man's hair flies high, as he quickly falls to his knees in front of his father. Silence then takes over the entire area. Our young protagonist still shows confusion about all of this, and the elder remains serious with a haughty look. He says that the young man is causing a commotion during the rites and will ask for an explanation later, but for now, he must repent for 3 days. The protagonist's father remains silent while maintaining a skeptical expression. Promptly, the younger man agrees to fulfill his punishment. He looks at his body and realizes that he is alive again. His scars, calluses, and wounds are completely gone. Thus, he realizes that he has returned to his past, the past he longed to return to, having been brought back to the Green Mountain Myeon clan. Sometime later, the protagonist heads to the ancestors' temple, soon entering the place and closing the door. With a tired tone, the young man assumes that his elder truly has no mercy. But soon he realizes that he cannot simply accept this happily, since this is an inexplicable event that could become a problem in the future. Still, our hero feels tense about all of this. He quickly gives up thinking about it, as he won't find an answer with just his thoughts. But something still grips the young man. His mind notices something at this very moment. So he sits on the ground and wonders if he has returned to 18 or 19 years old. Thus, judging by the autumn weather and the appearance of his relatives, he assumes that he must have gone back 26 years into the past. This can only mean one thing. In anger, he ends up punching his support, for he realizes that in less than a year, his clan will be destroyed. Therefore, the young man assumes that he doesn't have time to lie down and relax. He then opens the door with extreme force. Soon our hero recognizes his brother, who was about to enter. The younger one asks where the protagonist is going. Tongue-tied, Hojong tries to think. His brother tells him that he needs to stay there for 3 more days, and our young man knows this and asks why the other is there. The kind brother opens his kimono to retrieve something, and admits that he was worried because the young man would only be drinking water for 3 days, so he brought him some rice cakes made by himself. Our protagonist stares at his brother's face, remembering that Jippyeon will die in a year and a half. The young man asks our hero to eat before their elder discovers, but Hojong keeps his father in mind, for he knows that he will die by the villain's sword as he is the clan leader. All of this seems like a cruel joke to the protagonist, thus assuming in anger that he will eliminate the enemies before that happens. In his mind, he says that he will prepare properly to prevent this from happening, and his brother is confused by the sudden hug. Hojong promises that he will reach his peak and kill all the trash that dared to take away his happiness. Some time later, the protagonist arrives somewhere. Thus, he follows the path and climbs the stairs. The servants bow and greet the young master. Our protagonist continues forward until he makes an abrupt stop, standing in front of 2 guards at the place. Both greet the young master and ask why he is there. Our protagonist says he wants to see his father. The guard asks if the young man came because he was called, but Hojong replies that he did not. With that, the elder approaches slightly, saying that in that case, our protagonist does not have permission to enter. Hojong claims he's in a great hurry. The other responds that he has strict orders not to let anyone in until noon. With that, our young man apologizes and requests that they deliver a message to his father, to which the 2 agree. Our protagonist states that he will learn the true blue silk technique ahead of time. The elder agrees, but they soon realize and become confused by this news. The bearded one asks if he really plans to do something of such a high level. Our young man confirms and then withdraws, but not before reminding them to inform his father. He then leaves the temple where his father is, keeping in mind that this technique will soon be in his grasp. The guards wonder if Hojong will really learn one of the 5 martial arts of the young clan. His companion says it is impossible for someone like the young master, but his second young master might be able to achieve it. We soon see that in the past, Hojong used to hate Jippyeon, because his brother's talent was so great that their father used to talk to him alone. So the protagonist treated him as if he didn't even exist. The little one says it's cruel to stay hungry for so long because no one will last in a battle if they only consume water. He sighs and quickly looks around. Then he asks if the protagonist is hungry and if he wants him to bring something. Our hero remains silent, and his brother mentions finding an inn he might like, but he's quickly interrupted by our young man who calls his name. Silence fills the place at that moment, and the younger one, confused, questions him. But our young man ends up apologizing to him, thus asking for forgiveness for treating him so poorly. He then admits that he is useless and dishonest for not being able to support his brother's growth, and all of it was because of his foolish pride. Finally, he assures that this will not happen again. Impressed, his little brother tries to say something, but his brother finishes by saying he's sorry for causing so many problems, and even if he is not forgiven, he hopes they can both forget this grudge. Jippyeon realizes that Hojong has truly changed and no longer hates him. Thus, the young man ends up crying with happiness at hearing this confession. His brother lets out a light sigh accompanied by a smile. Both stand side by side, and Hojong comforts him. The 2 guards observe in silence. They are confused but impressed by the scene they are witnessing. Next, we see another place, the kitchen of Old Sunny. Jippyeon, picking up a piece of fish, calls his brother. The latter lifts his gaze to look at him. He then comments that the boy's flying swallow cry has become more vivid. Our young man is impressed that he noticed and admits that his way of walking is quite different from usual, revealing that his energies seem to move slightly ahead of his body. Hojong notices and remains silent, recalling that he practiced the flying swallow method during his exile. It was a dangerous plan, because he had to focus and understand every inch and fiber of his body. Thus, he realized that his body had also regressed in an extreme way, as he had to forcibly extract the internal ki from his body as if it were shattering into several pieces. It was a painful and extreme process, thus acknowledging that it wasn't easy. The young man ended up with a nosebleed. His mind and body were being kept together solely by his willpower. Jippyeon realizes that his brother's flying swallow method must already be at 7 stars. Realizing something extreme, the young man agrees, then revealing that he has mastered the flying swallow method completely. Standing up surprised, the younger one asks if this is true, but soon congratulates him, and Hojong realizes that due to his internal ki change, his walk has slightly altered. Even so, his brother's talent and perception were such that it allowed him to notice this with his own eyes. The other notices something strange as a familiar ki approaches. Hojong, sipping his tea, realizes there are 3 people, one of them with an acceptable level of strength. His brother walks ahead to greet them, but he is soon stopped by bumping into someone, a woman who glares at him with an angry scowl. He tries to apologize, but the 2 pass by the young man without acknowledging him. While the 2 rude people talk, the younger one ends up meeting his friend. Namgong Sangwa comments that the place they're in isn't oppressive at all. Our protagonist drinks his tea while his brother converses. With a serious and attentive look, the young man remains alert. The elder suggests the girl try the fish there until he recognizes the protagonist's brother, calling him Brother Junghak. Then the younger one decides to introduce his older brother. Cordially, our hero greets and introduces himself as Yeon Hojong. The elder introduces himself as Lee Junghak, but is quickly interrupted by the girl who asks if they came just to see the view. Desperately, the man denies it and then asks his brother to order some dishes. The woman then looks around, then asks if the man has the audacity to call that a dish of food. Jippyeong, with his head down, returns to his seat. Then he apologizes, saying he shouldn't have suggested coming to that place. But he is soon interrupted by the protagonist, who calls him. He says they need to celebrate his success and that the young man should buy him a drink. With great emotion, the young man says he will buy as many drinks as the elder wants. Time passes with the place in silence. Even the woman's shout becomes evident as she claims it's a disgrace for someone inferior to give a lecture. Her companion tries to ask his young lady to calm down, pointing out that people are watching. With a snobbish smile, she wonders whom he's referring to, saying there are many insects in that place. Both brothers end up staring at her, but Jippyeong shows a scowl of anger. The two try to convince her to stop talking about the brothers since they both belong to a prestigious clan. With a sneer, the girl says no one recognizes the Ragged Yeon clan as one of the 7 great clans. She then tells the boys to whisper but reminds them that she could tear their mouths off. Suddenly, the younger one stands up. Our protagonist lifts his gaze and looks at him. He sees his little brother turning towards the woman. He tries to call his companion, who is surrounded by an aura full of rage. Soon, the younger one shouts that the woman is going too far. She looks confused by such a statement. Then the boy assumes that this vulgar language and so many insults must be the customs of the clan she belongs to. This leaves the young woman completely paralyzed. But from that paralyzed face, a wicked smile emerges. The same girl starts laughing, saying they think they're special just because others consider them one of the 7 great clans. She feels her stomach hurt from laughing so hard, but the boy simply says something unexpected. He remarks that her upbringing wasn't the best for her to display such attitudes, which irritates her completely. The woman then punches the table with extreme force, breaking it. The entire place falls silent after that display of fury. Then she says she'll open a hole in his stomach to see what's inside. The older brother tells the boy that the next time he sees people like this, he shouldn't waste his time because fixing such people is only possible with a good beating. But the young woman, still with a wicked smile, asks if she really needs fixing. She then points to the protagonist and calls for her servant. She tells the man to make the meal before her. The elder brother is dumbfounded by such a statement and command, but right after that response, he receives a direct slap to the face. The young woman asks if he wants to be expelled from the Manhwa territory family. He then approaches, saying they heard what the girl said. So he tells them to hurry up, but before he can finish, our protagonist grabs him by the head. His enormous strength subdues him, forcing him to kneel. His gaze is directed at him with extreme hatred and fury. Soon, the protagonist releases the man's head, causing him to fall backward. But he quickly attacks again, delivering a direct blow to the elder's abdomen. The man ends up spitting saliva out of his mouth while our protagonist remains still, staring at the lady. She prepares to launch an extremely powerful attack. She then rushes toward our protagonist while continuing to call him a worm. Our young man prepares his hands in a technique. The more experienced woman asks if he's crazy because the celestial wind technique shouldn't be used with bare hands. She expects him to dislocate his shoulder and break his arm. But quickly, the protagonist moves his hand forward, executing a curved, smooth strike with a wave around her arm, thus grabbing her forcefully. Soon we hear the young woman scream as she suffers the pain of that attack. Her bright kai is severed and she tries to curse him, but notices a kick coming her way. That kick hits her leg, dislocating her bone. She is surprised for a moment, until she sees her leg completely shattered against the ground. A shrill scream escapes her mouth from the pain that was caused. She then begins to crawl backward, letting out some grunts. Even if our protagonist had been stabbed or struck, it wouldn't have mattered because as long as he was injured, he would have run to retaliate and split them in half. The woman looks at him and tells him not to approach her but to stay away. What just manifested was precisely the will of the Dark Emperor Asia that remained within our protagonist. Soon, the young woman starts screaming and cursing him in tears, and says that his clan will not go unpunished for the humiliation he subjected her to. Our hero remains silent, merely observing those crude words until she says she will eradicate his entire clan. Hatred surges within Hojong, and it becomes suddenly visible in his eyes. Then he crouches down and asks her how she plans to do that, leaving her confused. Our protagonist wants to know how Namgung plans to eradicate his clan. His brother calls out to him, finding the intimidating behavior strange. The girl ends up saying that he is to blame and that the Namgung clan will seek revenge. But our hero interrupts her. Immediately after, he quickly kicks the chair beside him, making a piece of it fly. He then grabs the leg of the chair like a weapon, saying he now has one more reason to kill her and bury her so that her clan will never know what happened. Namgung Sanghwa, completely traumatized, cries out for help. But it's in vain as the protagonist attacks her all at once, and all we hear is her scream. Sometime later, we see a distant place, a house in the middle of the forest. The protagonist's father asks him to explain himself. His face is calm, radiating great seriousness. Soon, our hero reveals that he ended up fighting due to a common conflict. But his father speaks sternly, saying that's not what he asked him. The protagonist's younger brother becomes uncomfortable in that situation. He looks at both of them, alternating his gaze between them, feeling a bit nervous in this tense situation. Then the father says that the face of the son from the Lai clan was ruined, and the daughter of the Nan Guang clan has a broken arm and leg. They said the girl's external and internal injuries were extremely severe, and that it would take at least half a year for her to recover. Hojong says they clearly showed murderous intent and soon demanded that they bow, while his father says he could have simply walked away. But he is suddenly interrupted by our young man, who asks if they are really one of the 7 great clans. The bearded man asks what he means by that. Our protagonist explains that the girl didn't seem to recognize them as one of the 7 great clans and considered herself superior to them. This news leaves the elder surprised. Soon after, our young man leaves the room with the guards. Hojong thinks that even considering the situation, he shouldn't have said he did nothing wrong because this brutality is not the way of the orthodox path. This is the way of the unorthodox, which is the complete opposite of the Yan clan's route and also contrary to his father's will. He admits he became accustomed to the faction he lived in for so long. After all, he spent 30 years as the Dark Emperor. Soon after, Hojong wonders what he will do about the true blue silk techniques since he'll get scolded if he asks his father about it. We then see another distant place located outside the Yan clan. An old man with steady hands is treating someone's arm. It is the girl who had a conflict with the protagonist. The head of the Nambong family watches the young woman, who remains in a critical condition. He then asks if she will be okay. The doctor soon reveals that it's less severe than they initially thought, but the problem is the wound in her heart. It seems she received a great shock, and while her body should recover in half a year, nothing can be done about the mental shock. The bearded man observes his daughter with a neutral and serious expression. Silence then fills the room as the doctor leaves. Then the elder greets the young master who was at the door. The younger one calls his father, who recognizes him as Haiyan. This is the second chief, the second son of the clan, Nambon Haiyan, who asks what his father thinks. The man with long-tied hair says that her injuries are very serious and regrets sending her to see the world. The young man quickly says that his sister must have learned something from the incident. But there is still a detail in this whole situation. Because even though they helped with her personal development, they cannot forgive the criminal who did this to her. The elder says that the culprit is from the Yan clan. Nambon Haiyan then says that the clan they belong to has only 50 years of history, that they dared to mess with their clan. Now he wants to know if his father plans to let them go unpunished. The man looks into the distance for a moment as his shadow falls over his face. Thus, he assumes that he will do exactly that. For even though the child was injured, he does not want to face a force as powerful as the Yan clan. With a clearly false smile, the younger man agrees, saying that the head of the family cannot act rashly. The elder then asks about the criminal who did this, but the young man promptly says that the individual will face the consequences as he is responsible for the whole situation. Next, the young man asks when the meeting of the successors will take place. We then see another scene where the full moon shines high in the sky. The protagonist's younger brother asks about this so-called meeting. His father explains that it is a festival where many disciples from the 7 great clans participate, and as the name suggests, it is meant to bring the clans closer together and create harmony. He then hands the entry permit to the younger son and mentions that he will send the blue squad with him, which surprises the young man considering it an honor. But his father asks if there is a problem as his son seems strangely tense. The young man then says that his older brother would be more suitable for this, and the elder understands. But the bearded man turns around and thinks for a moment. He then reveals to Jipion that his brother is dangerous, leaving him confused by that statement. The elder then admits that Hojong seems different lately and asks if his son hasn't noticed this. It's as if the protagonist has become a completely different person all of a sudden. Under the high moon shining in the sky, we see our hero in another place, surrounded by bamboo. He is diligently training, handling his staff with extreme skill. He ends up delivering a strong blow into the air, but then he feels a shock run through his body from his arm. He grits his teeth in pain and lets out a groan. Then he drops his weapon to the ground. Staring at his bloody hands, he admits that this is clearly his limit. He decides he must forget about the axe for now since he is having so many problems with a simple staff. He then wonders how long it will take him to regain his strength. But soon he hears someone calling him, expressing amazement that he is training. Our hero turns his gaze to the side for a moment, wondering why his father has come there, and the elder seems even more impressed that he is working hard even at night. Our protagonist reveals his desire to learn to use the spear and staff properly. His father is surprised to see that he is genuinely dedicating himself to mastering such weapons, but he wonders if his son isn't going to train with the sword, which the young man promptly declines. The father asks why and then questions whether he will train with the sword since, as the eldest son of the clan, he should improve his swordsmanship. But our hero explains that even if he strives to train and learn, what use would it be if it's not applied properly? The elder is surprised by such a statement and explanation. Then the young man says that the martial path is felt through the body, and he has found his trail that fits with his body, so he will continue this way. Silence lingers between the two present there. Then the protagonist's father turns silently, saying that the gatekeeper told him something. He asks if the young man really wants to learn the true blue silk technique, which our protagonist confirms that he does. The elder then explains that the true blue silk technique is one of the 5 great divine arts of the clan, and no one can learn any of the 5 great divine arts without the direct permission of the chief, so he wants to ask him for something. Surprise spreads across our protagonist's face. The elder then says that his response could affect his decision to allow him to learn the technique. Suddenly, we are taken to our protagonist's past, to his previous life. The disciples were shouting to protect the Yan clan of the Green Mountain, which they served so faithfully. A guard arrives at the main house, extremely exhausted. Leaning on his spear, he says that they cannot wait any longer, and the father then says that this is all about the 5 great divine martial arts. The two then turn around and see the weary man there. The protagonist's younger brother then reveals that he also wants to fight alongside their father. But the elder ends up throwing the original manual of the 5 great divine martial arts to the protagonist. Then he distances himself from them, heading toward the door in silence. He seems apprehensive about the sudden invasion, but then, swallowing his own saliva with conviction, he gathers his aura all at once. He then tells them to hurry and leave, for the man standing before them couldn't let his clan collapse just because an enemy was attacking. He then shouts that the Iron Wall squad will fight against the villains and defend the Yan clan, and everyone else agrees. Our protagonist, observing the books, starts thinking about his father. We return to the present, where the elder asks to pose a question. He asks if the young man knows all the forms of the true blue silk technique. He himself had mentioned to the gatekeeper before that he had memorized the entire true technique, but he is quickly interrupted by the elder, who says he didn't just learn that technique. Confusion spreads across the elder's face, and our protagonist seriously reveals that he knows all the forms of the 5 great divine arts. The protagonist's father is surprised by such a statement, but the young man simply confirms it, thinking that since his father taught him, he would like to tell him everything. That is, everything about the past he lived and especially the dangers he faced. But now it's not possible in his current life because it would generate many suspicions, and knowing this, Hojang states that it's still not the right time and thus ends up gripping his staff. He then says that he learned everything when he was younger in the martial arts library, which impresses his father that he still remembers it all. Soon, the protagonist's father wonders in his mind if the young man is lying, but he quickly realizes that in his eyes lies the truth that he truly knows all the forms. However, he still doesn't understand why he's in such a hurry to learn and wonders if there's a reason behind it that he doesn't know. Then the elder finds himself thinking and agrees, saying that he should go to the office the next day because he will help him develop the flying swallow method. The next morning at the chief's house in an isolated area, we see the protagonist focused in his father with his hands clasped, while the elder thinks that in half a month it will be enough, because it also took him that amount of time to gather his energy. Soon he begins to gather his energy along with his sons, but he notices something strange with that Kai. Then an immeasurable energy coming from the protagonist begins to flow and fill the entire room. The protagonist appears to be in apparent pain. His eyes start to glow intensely, and the light of his energy begins to spread throughout the house. The smoke starts to settle little by little. The elder is completely astonished by what he is witnessing, but he soon widens his eyes at the sight of his son. He can see him focused, yet he still can't believe it, because it hasn't even been an hour since he started the exercises and he has already shown extreme proficiency in them. Our protagonist then lets out a single sigh, looking forward with extreme determination and calmness. Soon night falls over the Yan Mountain clan. Our protagonist bows with extreme politeness and then says they are finished. The elder remains impressed by how fast it was. Our young man seems surprised by this and thinks he's acting strangely. He then says that it meant a lot to him to feel his father's Kai. The bearded man stays silent for a long moment, but soon he shows a sincere smile, saying that he worked hard and that the meeting of the successors will soon take place. Our protagonist agrees, to which his father says he wishes to send his brother to this meeting in his place, but the protagonist doesn't seem surprised. And then with a monotonous expression, he says that he understands. His father looks surprised, asking if that's really okay with Hojang. But the protagonist just confirms, and the elder asks if he really doesn't want to participate in the meeting, but our protagonist declines, saying that no one would want to sit around watching a bunch of kids who've barely left their diapers boasting to each other. And just thinking about it makes him nauseous, leaving his father completely stunned by such an attitude. Sometime later, we hear the galloping of horses. The brother comments that the carriage is really huge, to which our protagonist agrees while chewing on a small plant. The younger one then remarks that the small carriage was indeed fast, and with a monotone tone, our protagonist confirms. A month quickly passes, and they arrive in the city of Anhui, where everyone seems excited about the prospect of delicious food. Our protagonist wonders if someone else was supposed to take his place at the meeting of the successors. But even so, this is good news since it will allow him to discover the true nature of his enemy. He focuses his eyes, radiating a bright blue vital energy. He knows the enemy will either be in the great ancient institution or among the 7 great clans, and if he remembers correctly, the enemy's hand techniques were from the Orthodox faction. In addition to his own clan, 6 others will be participating in the meeting. He needs to keep a close eye on 3 clans in particular. With a smile, he reveals that these are the Peng clan, the Mayon clan, and the Zhuge clan. We are then taken to a forest near the city of Anhui, where sparks are flying. We see a seemingly exhausted boy standing before the flames. He shows apparent desperation as he hides behind a tree. A man in the distance throws an explosive pouch in his direction. The young one leaps to avoid the attack, which ends up exploding against the tree where he had been. After that, the boy covers his body with his blue kai energy, thus dodging that extremely dangerous attack. The tree shatters and spreads across the area due to the explosion. The elder man looks around, noticing that the tree is splintered, and assumes that the young one is fast. Someone else from another location comments that it's obvious, and the man turns his face toward the voice. It's a girl who says that with so many old trees, he's foolish enough to use a fire technique. The man with a goatee prepares desperately. Then the girl stares at him seriously, saying she has an important question to ask. She asks if he has already used everything he had in his pockets. The man is surprised by the young woman's statement, confirming that he has no more bombs. He tries to tell her to wait, but she charges at him all at once, delivering a palm strike directly to the elder's abdomen, sending him flying several meters toward a distant tree. The smoke begins to clear gradually. Soon the younger brother lands on the ground calmly and gently. The girl then grabs a money pouch left by the man. The young one asks why he is always the bait, while the girl expresses her frustration with the oil that was in the pouch. She then says that as the older sister, she should be the bait, and if he thinks it's unfair, he should have been born first. She quickly tells him to put out the fire because she's hungry, and these two are Zhuge and Zhuge Ayan. The girl remarks that they will be late for the meeting of the successors, so they need to hurry, and her younger brother asks her to wait for him. Some time later, we see the Thorny Melody Pavilion, a place full of people eating and enjoying drinks. In the room, we find the 2 siblings enjoying a fine meal, until the older sister notices something. In her thoughts, she says she heard a scream. She then asks if her brother heard it too, as he sips a bowl of ramen. She quickly tells him they need to leave. The young woman then dashes away from the table, knocking the bowl into her brother's face. He watches the scene and says he didn't hear a word she said. We see her running through the dense and bright forest, until, in another location, a staff flies high and spins in the sky. This is the weapon of an injured fighter. Our protagonist remarks that the trajectory is stable and that his opponent has a solid foundation, but there's something more. He then tosses his staff to his adversary. He admits that there cannot be a well-trained fight if the other fights as if it's not a real life and death battle. The man, completely tense, grits his teeth. In the distance, in a small bush, the girl watches. The elder man asks his master to let him try once more, and suddenly something falls into the bush. It's the girl's brother, who joins her in observing the training. After some time in the fight, the protagonist delivers a powerful strike against his opponent, who barely manages to block it with his weapon. The man tries to deflect the attack by pushing it to the side. But as soon as he tries, the weapon stops midway, leaving him confused. Suddenly, the staff is pulled back instantly. With this, our protagonist prepares to make another attack. The elder man is surprised by such a clever trick. Instinctively, he manages to jump and dodge the strike aimed at his feet. But quickly, in another swift movement, the weapon strikes again, this time hitting directly in his abdomen. With the elder's scream, the girl recognizes it as the sound she had heard before. Salivating and struggling to breathe, the man falls to his knees in front of the protagonist, who thinks he has succeeded. At that moment, his body feels light, likely the result of constantly training whenever he could. Even his true blue silk technique is more stable at this moment. Soon, he should be able to advance to the technique of the 4 guardian gods. But suddenly, he looks to the side, noticing something. It's the leader of the Blue Operations Squad. His name is Shimo. Our hero states that he needs to leave to wash up and will leave his guests with him, which the elder man understands. The bearded man waits until the person in the bush reveals themselves. He then says that he can wait all day for them to show up. The bush starts rustling quickly with a whisper. Finally, the girl stands up and reveals herself to the man, leaving her brother completely shocked and surprised. She quickly introduces herself as Jigal Ayan and apologizes for coming there because she heard a scream. She swiftly pulls her younger brother and shows him to the man. The bearded man remarks that it's quite rude to spy on a duel, while the protagonist wonders if she's really someone from Jigal. At first, he briefly sensed the kiss of these people, but there's something more there. The girl blames her brother for running there and says she'll have to scold him later. The 2 siblings run off while the boy tries to keep up, and our protagonist keeps in mind that their energy's nature is different from that of criminals. He cannot jump to conclusions until he sees their martial arts, because in this world, even a monk could be an assassin. The same girl then turns her face in the direction of our protagonist. She observes him from a distance while he stands with his back turned. She notices that he's also watching and wonders who will end up scolding him. That night, we see the well-lit hotel. Suddenly, a huge explosion occurs. The dishes in the place shatter in a way that spreads noise throughout the room. All the people immediately panic due to the incident. They quickly look around and scream in despair. a thick smoke begins to rise toward the window. Far from there, a man stomps hard on the ground, breaking it. This same man, utterly hideous, realizes that the person who injured his subordinate is in that location. Pouring wax on the ground, he wishes for the culprit to show up and assumes he'll burn the place down if they don't appear. The younger brother asks what all that fire is, but the young woman says it's a continuation of what happened the day before. The boy, confused, asks what she means. The young woman promptly replies that he's the boss of the guy she defeated. Her brother suggests they need the help of the Yun clan, but the young woman quickly disappears. She moves ahead while the boy decides to seek help on his own since his sister will be busy. With great grace and beauty, she prepares to land. She gracefully descends onto the roof, observing them. She then shouts that she's there so he can stop playing with fire. The injured man says she's the one responsible. With his broken arm, he tells his boss that it was that girl who attacked him. He suggests they capture and torture her, but something quickly happens. A heavy strike hits his abdomen all at once. The hideous man reveals that he can't see her because of the person getting in his way. He then asks her to come down so they can talk properly since they should introduce themselves face to face. The girl notices that this man can use the shadow palm technique and asks what will happen if she refuses. All of the man's servants realize that she just refused and they begin to hurl sacks in her direction. With a smile, the man points at the girl using both arms. He continues to maintain his malicious grin as if he's in complete control of the situation. The sacks approach, emanating a strange red aura, ready to explode. The girl notices the sparks and is quickly alarmed, but her brother leaps in front all at once, using the technique known as Celestial Soul to collect all the sacks at once. With them in his arms, he jumps in another direction. He then gracefully lands on the ground with the wax grenades, but suddenly, his face shows an unusual pain. His sister rushes over to see that he has been struck by kunai. The weapons emit a red energy with a pink hue of poison. This causes the poor boy to start feeling the effects. The girl smells it and quickly realizes it's poison. She becomes desperate at the thought of her brother dying. The daggers return to the man's hands, who tells her not to worry. He says there's an antidote which he has because he needs to keep them alive in order to sell them. He then reveals himself as the Lord of Fire and Lightning from the great philosophy of Mabang. Emanating her blue aura, the girl demands the antidote, but soon her demands turn into a fierce threat, covered by her aura. We see the wreckage of the area around them, and above the building our protagonist observes everything. Chipion, the younger brother, approaches, asking if he should instruct the blue squad to focus on extinguishing the fire. He also reveals that the Jeagle clan has requested help, but Hojong tells him to stay calm since the fire won't spread. The younger one then says that if that's the case, they should help the clan as quickly as possible, but he's met with silence from our protagonist. This leaves the younger brother confused, but his elder brother remains completely focused on watching the girl. He thinks to himself, urging her not to stop and to show him more. He needs to learn more about the Jeagle clan's martial arts because with those techniques, they could be evenly matched. He keeps in mind that if they are the criminals who destroyed his clan, then the suspense grows as he observes the girl. He reveals that he will turn the entire Rubai province into a sea of fire, starting with the girl if she proves to be an enemy. Suddenly, another explosion occurs at the scene. The girl moves her palm deliberately. She maintains a battle stance with a firm posture. The tall man is impressed by this. He realizes that the Jeagle clan's secret is truly something valuable, as it appears to be the first technique of the divine black mistletoe. The girl quickly starts gathering her energy in her hands, but she keeps in mind that she needs to hurry. The man comments that she truly has cold blood since she's only using her secret technique after her brother collapsed. This angers the girl, clearing her thoughts. The elder man says it's almost cute because it will end her short life, but he's soon interrupted as he notices a kick flying towards him at extreme speed. Tilting his head back, he manages to dodge the strike. This leaves the girl impressed and stunned by the movement. The man then throws 3 more daggers in her direction. The girl promptly dodges the first one. Gathering her energy in her palm, she prepares herself. She jumps into the air, dodging the other kunai that were thrown. She lands a celestial lesser foot technique directly on the man's abdomen. He is pushed back with a strong impact. He slides across the ground with ease, so to speak. With heavy breathing, she realizes that she was able to hit him. She then advances again for another attack, this time aiming higher, trying to strike directly at his head. But quickly, one of the kunai flies towards her, heading straight for her head in a perfect trajectory. However, with extreme agility, the young girl manages to dodge the preemptive attack that was launched. The man is impressed while maintaining his pale and cold eyes. The young girl, noticing this, distances herself because he was able to counterattack even after being hit by such a powerful strike. Shortly after, the man spits lightly and says that was truly a painful move, and so he assumes he will destroy the girl completely, then launches his weapons. Ayan quickly dodges them with extreme agility, but as more blades are thrown, she manages to redirect them, breaking them in the air with extreme force and technique. But as soon as she looks ahead, she sees something terrifying. The man is charging towards her with incredible speed. He quickly lands a kick on her side all at once. The girl feels the pain from that strike. Using her arm, she manages to slightly cushion the impact. She then wraps her arm around the man's leg, holding it. preparing a punch with her other free hand. She lands a prominent blow right on the man's chest. With that, they both distance themselves once more. She shows signs of exhaustion while the man comments that it's to be expected. He continues to wear his malignant, sarcastic grin, seeing that the girl has no more strength left. She appears desperate for a moment, while the elder man notices that this martial art has taken too much out of her. Ayam, struggling to breathe, curses herself and her thoughts for her weakness. The rest of the men decide to attack now that she's exhausted. She ends up surrounded as the shadows close in. She grits her teeth in despair, realizing there's no way out. In the distance, the fire spreads further through the forest. Our protagonist watches the scene with a certain coldness. His brother tries to call him, but he soon jumps over the railing, declaring that he'll charge at them all at once. Our hero observes the scene, still maintaining a neutral expression. He then lets out a light sigh, realizing that his brother is truly stubborn. He thinks to himself that there's only so much they can do here. The young man then grabs his weapon and quickly prepares to launch it towards the battlefield. Holding it with extreme strength and brutality, he hurls it all at once towards the arena. One of the men who was about to strike the girl ends up hitting her directly in the rib area. She staggers back from the pain caused by the blow. She admits to herself that she can no longer feel her strength. The men are pleased that she's no longer jumping around, finding this sight extremely satisfying. One of the men says they should take advantage of her, while the weapon flies towards him. The staff swiftly strikes and decapitates him in one fell swoop. Blood sprays onto the girl's face, leaving her with a surprised look. She sees the man fall to the ground while everyone else is stunned. From the surrounding mist, someone walks towards her. It's the protagonist, who remains calm through it all. He lets out a deep sigh, and the hideous man asks who he is. The girl realizes that this is the young master of the Green Mountain Young clan. She wonders if he's really going to help, but is still confused by why he's staring at her so menacingly. Suddenly, a man with a face resembling a monkey approaches. He arrives in an intimidating manner beside the protagonist, saying that when the captain asks, he should answer. But he's interrupted as he collapses to the ground unconscious. Everyone around is confused by this, while the protagonist picks up the weapon that fell to the ground. Hojong places the weapon on his shoulder while observing the men there. They are hesitant but still manage to surround our hero. They all wonder what the young man just did. But quickly, the boy readies his weapon in a strong stance. The leader shouts for them to try and stop him. But the protagonist then begins to unleash his aura and moves at incredible speed, using such insane speed that it seems as if there are multiple of him in the area. With that, he charges at a big man, defeating him with a single strike. Another is struck on the head and defeated in the same process. Then one man's skull is also crushed by the massive weapon that our hero carried. Even after so many strikes, the boy refused to stop and continued advancing, delivering dozens more blows all at once. The bones of those struck end up shattering into thousands of pieces. One of the men's arms even ends up twisted in the opposite direction. The villain stands there with an incredulous look, watching it all unfold. And so our protagonist eliminates the last target, standing face to face with the last villain still on his feet. The elder man is terrified by the scene. He just realized that all of his comrades are dead because the protagonist struck only at their vital points. With a red aura covering his body, he pulls out a kunai, holding two of them at once. The villain then asks who our hero is while the young girl stands up. With a flushed face, she tries to thank him, but the protagonist quickly grabs her arm. She tries to ask what's happening, but the young man simply orders her to stay silent. What he truly desires is to see the girl's true Kai. As he holds her, he manages to catch a glimpse of her energy. While staring at her, he questions whether she is his enemy, but he quickly notices something. He releases her all at once. Our hero then commands her to grab her brother and leave, leaving the girl confused. Before leaving, she warns him that the man's primary weapons are daggers. She adds that he also has hidden weapons, emphasizing that all the blades are poisoned and even a scratch can be fatal, but the protagonist interrupts her, telling her to do as he said. He reminds her to leave immediately, as she's only getting in the way. Surprised, the young girl stares at him. Then she picks up her brother onto her shoulder all at once. The villain sneers, asking if he's finished. He mocks, saying that acting tough in front of a girl in his condition is inappropriate. But the protagonist quickly realized that his techniques are the silent martial arts of red fire, surprising the man with this knowledge. The villain then questions how he knows about his technique. With a sly smile, he decides to ask a question himself, wondering what martial art the young man will use. The girl, with extreme agility and skill, leaps high into the sky. She still carries her brother with care, but she bites her lip, thinking how irritating this whole situation is. She admits to herself that she'll make the protagonist owe her next time. As she passes by a member of the Blue Squad who calls out to the young master, he informs her that they've taken care of the fire at the southwest gate and asks if they should assist the master, but the young man remains silent. The elder squad member asks what's going on. The boy promptly calls for the leader, who becomes curious about what he has to say. The boy approaches the leader while observing the scene of numerous dead bodies. He questions whether the man truly thinks his brother needs the help of people like them. Since what's happening, there is a massacre carried out by a single person. The man can feel the enormous weight of the protagonist's weapon. The young man remains skeptical, with a cold and calculating gaze. but he still launches another attack toward the elder, striking hard in the neck area. The elder's face contorts even more, adding even more grotesqueness to his horrid visage, and with blood dripping from his mouth, he grinds his teeth in pain. But he quickly counters by throwing a dagger at the young man. The protagonist dodges it with extreme agility, executing a somersault towards the man. The other man can't keep up with the speed and continues to live ahead, until he receives a heavy blow to his back, causing him to scream in pain. The man falls to the ground, stunned, while our protagonist lands gracefully. The elder quickly recovers, declaring that he will finish him off. Hojong agrees, saying that he's starting to get bored, and thus confuses his opponent. With a light sigh, he admits that he was eager to see someone use such a martial technique. But so far, the elder has only used his technique to reinforce his daggers, and he questions whether that's not a shame for him. The man remains tense and irritated by the protagonist's provocation. However, the young man continues to insult him, saying he hasn't even seen a fire attack, implying that Meijang doesn't deserve his title. Yawning with boredom, Hojong asks Meijang to be honest, questioning whether he truly learned the technique from the silent god, or if he's ever actually seen such abilities used in practice and action. Then we receive an explanation about the Four Guardian Gods technique, a martial art that begins with the divine energy of the north. But there's still doubt as to why this is so. A dark-skinned man points to something. It's a wall in front of him, which he punctures with a single finger. He then retracts his hand, leaving a perfect hole. He explains that the key of the water god is the most solid of the four gods, making it very delicate. At its peak, it can even block rams and cannons. We see that this is the protagonist's master, passing on the basic teachings to him. Hojong observes as the old man concentrates his energy on the stone. He then creates a drawing on the wall using his martial arts. He explains that over time, one delicately refines their martial arts. Afterward, he draws something strange on the wall. It's a depiction of a giant lion turtle, and the old man says that this is the god of the north. Our young protagonist touches the wall and asks what he needs to do to awaken such power. The old man decides to be honest and admits that he hasn't reached that level. He advises Hojong to take advantage of the enemy's murderous intent and warrior spirit, as the infernal fury will bring forth the energy of the water god. The elder begins to grind his teeth with intense fury. He then invokes a demonic tone, declaring that he will grant his wish. He drops his weapons from both hands. Immediately after, he charges forward before they even hit the ground. As soon as the weapons touch the floor, he's already meters away from our protagonist. But Hojong still appears bored with the irritating situation. The man, with eyes ablaze, thinks to himself that these are the teachings of the silent red fire that he was referring to. Yet, as he attacks, our young hero easily dodges. He follows up with 3 more attacks, which Hojong also avoids with ease. Soon, our hero concludes that all of this is incredibly weak. He dismisses it by saying that this is just fire, not even comparable to an ant. He then questions if the man has any other talents while the villain continues to attack viciously, but the protagonist keeps evading. With extreme anger and bulging veins, Meijang can only curse the protagonist. With deep hatred, he vows that even the protagonist's internal organs will be burned to ashes. His heart pounds furiously with a desire for revenge due to the humiliation he's faced. With this, he charges forward with his hand engulfed in infernal flames, but he quickly ends up striking the wall where our protagonist was standing. The wound disintegrates upon contact with the man's hand. Our protagonist can only smile in response to the situation. Extremely exhausted and with veins bulging, the elder realizes that the boy is just laughing. This only drives him to attack more aggressively, while our protagonist thinks to himself that he just needs a little more. The man's silhouette begins to distort as his rage grows. Even so, he continues to attack with extreme brutality, but our protagonist dodges with graceful ease. He keeps in mind that he needs more of that power. The elder then manages to strike the protagonist's weapon, sending it flying into the air. He follows up with a claw strike while shouting for Hojong to go to the other world. But quickly, the protagonist grabs his hand and interlocks their fingers. The man claims that this is rash and foolish since the boy will be burned to death. With a wicked and boastful smile, he begins to channel his energy, but his aura starts to fade little by little amidst his laughter. It is completely extinguished as a blue aura envelops his body. He realizes that it's newly formed water vapor. Looking down, he notices an ocean at his feet. It seems to be growing larger, as if it's about to submerge the elder. Confused and disbelieving, he questions what's happening. But the truth is, he had already fallen onto the turtle's shell long before. This was the technique that our protagonist had sought to awaken. Mabing realizes that his dark arts have been completely extinguished. Meanwhile, our hero proclaims that the being has awakened. It's the water god of the 60th year, the ruler of the north, and now he will wield its power. This is the turtle god that has come to aid him. The villain is utterly terrified by the scene. Mabing tries to summon his fire again, but finds it impossible. With blood dripping from his nose, he wonders if everything he used was merely repurposed by the protagonist, particularly his teachings. His bleeding worsens rapidly. With extreme fury, he charges forward, cursing as he throws a punch at the protagonist, questioning what has been done to his internal ki. But suddenly, a thunderous sound is heard. It's the man being flung far away. He crashes to the ground while our protagonist thanks him. Hojong then announces that thanks to him, he has become capable of easily summoning the turtle. With shamelessness, the elder begs for mercy. But our protagonist, with a serious and threatening tone, declares that he will let him play with the fire he loves so much. This fills the villain's face with utter terror. Our protagonist gathers all his ki in his leg, preparing to unleash a powerful kick. The villain's pupils vanish as the foot approaches his face. The kick lands directly, sending the man flying backward. The villain is thrown into the flames that he himself had caused. He screams in desperation as the fire consumes his body. With his eyes locked on the protagonist, Mabang can only scream as his tongue melts in the fire. But our protagonist stands still, watching. He maintains a serene and serious expression as if he doesn't care at all. His brother stands behind him, completely shocked by what he is witnessing. Sometime later, we see the province from above after the attack. A ragged man asks about the state of the outer walls since they burned quite a bit, but another man replies that they're not too bad and that the limited damage was a miracle. The elder reveals that he heard the young master of the Green Mountain Yan clan caught an arsonist all by himself. The filthy beggar taps his companion, asking for a share of whatever information he has. Another man interjects, saying he heard that not only did the young master catch the arsonist, but he also burned him to death. But the portly man argues that the young master is too prestigious to do such a thing and would never commit such blasphemy. Soon someone arrives running quickly, a man of apparent great culture. He approaches the beggar, questioning whether he traveled all the way there. With clean hands, the newcomer grabs the beggar's dirty arm, saying he would have cleared his schedule in advance if he had known he was coming earlier. But the beggar replies that as a beggar, he shouldn't take up the time of the Lord of the Thorny Melody Pavilion and only came to see how the restoration was progressing. The elder reveals that it's going well, thanks to the help of the beggar's sect, and the bearded man says that if there are any problems, he should be informed. The elegant man then bows and bids farewell. The portly man asks who that person was, but the elder explains that he is the one who hired everyone there to help the Thorny Melody Pavilion. This leaves the two men completely shocked and impressed. That man is responsible for the intelligence organization of the Orthodox faction and is the successor of the beggar sect. Stroking his beard, he thinks about the protagonist, noting that he defeated someone like Mabang, one of the 13 of the Orthodox faction, without difficulty. His name is Gudtuksang, and he admits that he's dying of curiosity, saying that it's better to see for himself what the young master is like. He then runs off, declaring that the next place to beg is at the successor's meeting. Sometime later, in another place, we see a forest with a gentle breeze. This is where our protagonist is training. He reflects that the Turtle Guardian is in martial arts specialized in defense, but it's possible to use its strength to convert it into an excellent offensive martial art. It's also very effective in purifying turbid ki, and since ancient times it's said that if the yin of the Guardian is strong, then there will be no negative energy in the body. Suddenly, the young man turns his gaze to the side. The leader of the Blue Squad asks if he has finished his training, to which he agrees and asks about his brother. The bearded man says that young Jipyeong wanted to be alone for a while. Our protagonist is surprised by this, as it's not common for his brother to say such things. Doubt lingers in his eyes for a moment. He then glances at the other members of the squad, but he notices that the atmosphere in the area is tense until he realizes something. He sees the girl from before who has come to see him. He tells her to return to the Zhu clan since she has already recovered, but the girl promptly grabs his clothing. She reveals that she has an extremely important question to ask him. We then see a distant tree from the two. Someone lets out a brief sigh of apparent exhaustion. It's the protagonist's brother, who was at the top of that immense tree. He thought he knew a lot about his older brother, but the scene of how the protagonist's face looked, along with the scream of that man, remains ingrained in his mind. He realizes that he was wrong to think that he knew even a little about his brother. As Jipyeong reflects, he suddenly hears someone asking to stop being followed. He realizes it's his brother, along with the person from this huge clan who has a question for him. He begins to reconsider his actions, remembering how their father once told him that spying was wrong, while his brother argued it was the right thing to do in certain situations. With this in mind, the younger brother leaps from the tree, apologizing to his father in his thoughts. Then, from behind the trees, he starts to follow the two. They eventually reach a more secluded part of the forest, where almost no one can see them. Hojong sighs and asks what exactly is wrong with the girl. She conjures a sphere of energy, explaining that the black mistletoe technique is a powerful martial art. She managed to land a direct hit on that man, Mebang's abdomen, yet she wonders why he didn't suffer any damage. The protagonist then explains that the reason lies in her ki since her element is wood, which confuses her. Hojong realizes he's addressing the situation as an amateur would. He reveals that the cool, soft, and refreshing scent of her ki indicates that it has the same essence as birch trees. But there's still something missing in the explanation. The martial arts of that man, being the teachings of the silent red fire, are a visible element of fire that resembles a burning flame. And if you throw a birch tree into the fire, the flames won't extinguish. He explains that the girl was simply unlucky to encounter someone with an opposite element. She reflects, realizing she hadn't considered that the difference in ki properties, which she had trained so hard, would be the cause. The protagonist asks if that's all, but the girl admits she has another question. She's curious about why he seemed a bit more cruel than necessary. After all, the Lord of Fire and Lightning may have been extremely unpleasant and vile, but he was still burned to death. The protagonist asks why she considers it cruel, and the girl with tied-up hair responds that an ordinary person would definitely see it as cruel, since everyone else was watching that scene completely shocked. Our protagonist finally understands why his brother distanced himself to be alone and why the atmosphere had become so heavy. This is an orthodox faction, and he acted like the Black Emperor, but he acknowledges that his actions weren't entirely evil. He then reveals that the vile man had threatened his beloved brother's life. Additionally, he was a villain who started a fire endangering countless lives, which the girl somewhat agrees with, but she tries to say more. The protagonist promptly interrupts her, stating that death is fair to all because a good or bad person will meet death in the same way. In this case, it doesn't matter since the way one dies shouldn't be different from another. He then shares his ideology that villains should die painfully, while good people should find peaceful rest without suffering, as this is what he believes. The girl remains skeptical, with a thoughtful and deeply impressed expression. She thinks that the boy is her age, and that he speaks as if he's the age of her father, making everything even stranger. She then comments that the protagonist's aura resembles that of an older, very wise person, but the young man reveals that he's only 18 years old. Ahayan quickly tells him to stop scowling since he has the face of someone who has already lived all their days, but he responds with deep silence. He looks back, realizing what he said, and understands that this could be a problem since Jipyong is watching them. He then turns his eyes forward again, knowing that one day his beloved younger brother will understand this. The girl realizes she must remain cautious, because she's still only receiving help from this person. She reveals that she hates being indebted to someone, to which the protagonist simply tells her to repay the debt, but she quickly retorts, telling him to be quiet. She then reveals that she's a year older than the protagonist, so he should call her Nuna or older sister, which leaves him silent. Soon after, we transition to 2 days before the successors' meeting in the city of Anhui, where people are happily walking through the streets. Our protagonist arrives along with the Blue Squad on a horseback. The leader of the exploration announces that they've reached the city of Anhui. After dismounting from their horses, they approach the location of the meeting. The man knocks on the door, declaring that they are from the Green Mountain Mian clan and asking for the gate to be opened. The large gates of the estate swing open, allowing them entry. A rotund old man appears in front of them, seemingly the one assigned to receive them. With a serious yet slightly mocking expression, he looks over the Green Mountain Mian clan. He confirms that this is indeed the clan invited to the successors' meeting, introducing himself as Shimo, the one in charge of the escort. The portly man then introduces himself as Han Hamion from the Sikwan clan, saying it's an honor to meet the warriors of the Yan clan. The members of the squad recognize him. Our protagonist observes him, seeming to recognize his name. Soon, he also notices the person standing behind Han Hamion. This individual wears a seemingly insincere smile. Our protagonist knows that this man is directly affiliated with the Dang clan. Right after identifying those men, the hero thinks he must quickly repay his debt to Dang Quan, since the boy in front of him is the son of that same Dan man. Shinmo, in turn, promptly introduces the chubby one to the 2 young masters whom he has already heard a lot about. Without wasting time, Hamyang asks which of them is the second young master because he heard about his extraordinary talent. However, this is interpreted by the others as quite rude, especially for ignoring Hojang. Logically, the leader of the Blue Squad tries to interfere, but quite maturely, the protagonist tells them to sit down so they can eat quickly. And without any kind of retaliation, the boy just walks past the chubby one, ignoring him. In this case, the latter comments to his colleague that despite appearances, the boy has a lot of courage. After all, for young master Dang Yangshan of the Dang clan of Sichuan, it takes boldness to humiliate someone like them. In any case, the boy can't wait for the meeting of the successors. In the following days, during the successors' banquet hall gathering, a get-together takes place when the twins Pang Manho and Pang Daeho appear. Upon seeing this, the hero immediately recalls that clan is the same one from the conquerors of Hebei. The boy met these twins 2 days ago because Pang Daeho greeted him. But when his internal key was examined, it didn't have a villainous nature. Meanwhile, the girl the two are flirting with at the moment is Moyan Yanhwa from the Moyan clan, which is different because that specific clan is one the protagonist holds deep resentment toward due to his past. Regardless, he knows there's nothing to worry about at the moment, so that means only the Mayan clan is left to appear. With that, the hero asks where the successor of that clan is until, at a certain moment, a girl finds Hojong amidst the crowd. The twins in turn become even more enchanted by her beauty, and on the other side, Haiyan Nambong from the Namgong clan also makes his connections. At a certain point, he finds the same girl, and thinking the signal is for him, the boy says he has to leave. Rushing to Ayam, the young man tries to call her, but all she wanted was to talk to our protagonist, because she missed him even though only 2 days have passed since they last saw each other. In any case, our hero asks her to stop following him because he's very busy. But what catches Haiyan's attention most is his curiosity about why she is after Hojong. After a few more seconds, the two sit at a table to talk, and when the girl praises the martial arts of the Yun clan, the hero replies that it's nothing to brag about because, honestly, he needs to get stronger. In that case, the girl asks if he's trying to become the strongest in the world or something like that. And what Hojong says is that being the best is more valuable than being average. Despite this, Hyun listens to everything with jealousy because his clan is the one closest to being the strongest. Back to the conversation, the hero says that no one is invincible in Murim, so all that's left is to keep improving endlessly. However, Aya manages to recall someone who deserves to be called the strongest in the world. To her, that person is the martial emperor of the Four Directions, a legendary warrior who subdued the Blood Sect disaster 300 years ago. According to the story, he deserves that title because he learned the 4 martial arts that maximize each attribute. And besides that, she heard he had a golden dragon that gave him the nickname Emperor of the Yellow Dragon. In any case, the girl also thinks it's a bit exaggerated, but the fact that the protagonist is so focused draws attention. Being someone with 4 martial arts, Hojong associates it with the technique of the 4 guardian gods and the Yellow Dragon's key with the form of the 4 dragon gods. In that case, maybe the martial emperor of the Four Directions inherited the technique of the 4 guardian gods. Interested in the topic, the protagonist asks to hear more, but at that moment, the boy from the Dang clan shows up to interfere and sits down asking if he can join them, which he already does without even waiting for an answer, until Ion agrees without any problem since he's already there. Before anything else, the girl asks to introduce the colleague beside her, but the boy says he already knows very well who it is. However, he also makes it clear that he's not at that table to see him, already being a reason for concern for the girl. In any case, the young man asks her to serve the tea, but with a calm expression, the girl hands the cup back and asks him to serve himself. In this case, Yangshin recalls that he asked to be served, but the girl insists on doing nothing. Despite that, the young man remembers that Ion served the protagonist, but he was different because he was a friend. So the young master Dang says he can become a friend too, and in a harsh tone, the girl agrees on the condition that he be less rude. Obviously, such a reaction was not something he was expecting. But since she's cute, the boy settled for saying it was a relief that she wasn't as obedient as the other girls. However, that shameless statement was enough for Hyun to show up and tell the guest to stop bothering others and to stand up. Yangshin, in turn, advises the boy that he shouldn't go against someone from the Dang clan if he values his life, though the Nambeom are famous swordsmen. But even in this case, the boy comments that the strongest swordsman isn't even worthy of holding a candle to the strongest in the world. Thus, the two start a childish game of claiming which clan has more power. But as the argument starts being heard by everyone, someone else shows up to give his opinion. And in a very imposing way, he asks which fool thinks he's the strongest when the Mayang clan is right there. Because with just one word, it's enough to completely change the atmosphere. This man is the third young master of the Mayang clan, named Mayang Horim. With his immense aura, the boy only needs to walk down the stairs to capture everyone's attention. Then, returning to the subject of the most incomparable clan, he comments that he might accept it in the case of the Namgong or the Moyang. However, regarding the Dang clan, all the boy does is express his mockery to the fullest, making the young master furious. Because of that, Yangshin rudely questions what Horim is trying to say. That the Mayong simply states that in the Murim world, the word incomparable should not be used so carelessly. Moreover, due to the curious expression on the young master's face, the boy asks him to relax a bit because that expression makes him look weak. For Yangshin, that provocation was the last straw, so he didn't even think before lunging forward to defend his honor. However, since the protagonist was between the two, Ahayan tried to shout for him to protect himself, which wasn't necessary because the first person to make a move was someone who threw a cup toward Horim, who barely managed to defend himself. And without a shred of shame, after the cup interrupted the fight, our hero simply raised his hand to say it was a mistake. With an amused expression, Horim finds the excuse of a mistake funny as he crumples the cup. And the moment their eyes meet, the boy's smile grows larger until it becomes a full laugh. Then, finding the hero quite funny, he asks which clan he is the successor of. But before answering, the hero advises Horim to focus first on the enemy he's dealing with. In any case, even though it wasn't him he wanted to fight, Yangshin warns that if Hojong gets involved unnecessarily again, he will definitely be the first to lose his life in this place, and without further delay, the young master prepares to do something crazy. But once again, a cup is thrown, and this time deliberately hits Yangshin's head, making him faint before even getting to fight. After all, he was already being quite annoying. Wasting no time, our hero gets up to continue, but Hyan advises him not to make things worse, which came too late because in an instant the protagonist was already face to face with Horim. Upon closer inspection, it still wasn't clear if this was the villain's Kai, since what he felt earlier was subtly different. Because of that, the hero also releases aura to try to check it better, which made Horim immediately realize he was being read. In response, the boy activates a kind of aura protection that forms a barrier, and not wanting things to escalate further, Jipyeon calls out for his brother. But Ayan tells him not to get close because even though she also doesn't know what's happening, she understands that it's impossible to stop a man with eyes like those. Back to Yangshin, he only wakes up at that moment to be helped by his assistant. But the moment he remembers everything that happened and all the humiliation, the boy pushes back the person who was trying to help him. Definitely, he fainted from a mere cup, even though he is a legitimate member of the Dang clan. Then once again the boy's aura is released, but this time he uses the key of the three Yangs to take revenge once and for all. And just before a fatal strike, the protagonist's brother shouts to warn him. Thus, the blow approaches at an extraordinary speed and with a force full of the resentment of humiliation. However, the strike simply passes right by the protagonist, who manages to grab the boy's arm and squeeze it, making him groan in pain. With all that strength, Yangshin believes his arm will shatter, but he still tries to attack with his other hand, which is once again thwarted by a strike that hits his shoulder, dislocating the joint. This time the pain is even more unbearable, yet the hero doesn't intend to stop, activating the 12 northern celestial walls. At a certain moment, all of Yangshin's resistance fades, and after crying, he even urinates in his own pants. However, even with the boy's life in his hands, he decides not to go on because remembering everything he suffered in past battles, he understands that this definitely isn't the moment to focus on that. While the only thing he really needs to focus on now is the identity of the villain. With his goals changed, the hero finally lets go of the boy to confront the third young master of the Mayan clan once again. And now more prepared than ever, Hojong fixes his stance to request a friendly spar between the two. Naturally, with what such an invitation means, everyone present is shocked, including Horim. Still thinking well of the hero, he comments that he knows he is the young successor of the Green Mountain. And as the oldest one at the meeting, he first tries to express his gratitude for stopping the madman who was ruining the atmosphere. The boy asks to make a distinction, saying this is not the place for the two of them and invites Hojong to think about it after they've had a drink. But the hero simply replies that he talks too much, making the friendly mood disappear. In any case, the protagonist makes it clear that if the boy doesn't come to him, he will go to him. Thus, keeping his word, Hojong activates the static singularity skill, creating an illusion on the ground. To Horim, everything feels very strange because while the boy comes at a slow pace, all his senses are on high alert. And without even realizing it in a second, the two are close enough for any attack to land. Shocked by this, Horim takes the initiative to strike first, but even using the consecutive iron chain strike, nothing hits as the hero dodges everything. To the spectators, the iron chain attack is still impressive, so they want to know which martial art Yan is using. However, the younger brother knows better than anyone that these are just the 13 fists of the clan, the basic fist martial art. Still in combat, the hero manages to dodge all the opponent's strikes using that simple martial art and even counterattacks with a sweeping strike, which not only forces the boy to raise his guard, but also sends him skidding away. Feeling the pain from the attack, Horim becomes more concerned upon realizing he could have broken bones if he hadn't been careful. So naturally, he starts getting irritated with the hero. Unlike the protagonist who smirks and mockingly asks if he plans to keep fooling around like that. Being completely honest, the hero unleashes more of his power and advises that Horim must attack with intent to finish if he wants to stand on equal ground. And having already seen the extent of Hojong's power, the young master Mayong agrees instantly. Until just before the fight can reach its peak, a group of soldiers surrounds everyone, asking them to stop this commotion in a sacred gathering. And among them, Haiyan, leading the warriors, shouts asking what they think they're doing, now bringing yet another influential figure into the middle of the protagonist's fight with Horim. With the three aligned and surrounded by a vast number of guards, Haiyan takes the lead in the discussion and reminds them that Horim is the oldest here and must set boundaries. He also makes sure to reprimand the hero for picking fights like a rude delinquent. However, since the boy doesn't even pay attention, Haiyan takes it as a mockery of his clan's power. But someone asks him to stop with these unfair actions, and when he turns to retaliate against the intruder, to his surprise, it's Ayan. Wasting no time, the girl reminds everyone that they are at an official gathering and asks to be treated with respect, leaving Haiyan speechless. To begin her defense, the girl recalls that it was young Master Yansong who ruined the gathering. Therefore, she asks why they are trying to blame the protagonist for everything. In response, Haiyan argues that as she saw, instead of simply stopping Dang, the boy also attacked Mayong. However, Ayan truly believes that our hero is telling the truth when he said it was an accident. And to her, being someone quite generous, young Master Mayong should be able to forgive, which he agrees to without issue. From what she knows, the young clan of the Green Mountain doesn't use any secret throwing techniques, so Ayan reaffirms the honesty of the mistake. However, she also sees a bit of fault in the hero, which is why she asks him to explain himself. This creates a slightly tense atmosphere between the two as Ayan holds on to hope. While thinking about the matter, Jipyong tugs on the older one's shirt to express that he also agrees with her opinion. Then the protagonist understands that he acted hastily because when he thought he might find the villain's shadow, he couldn't control his murderous intent. Therefore, quite naturally, Hojong praises the martial arts of the Mayang clan and apologizes, saying all he wanted was to learn a few lessons, which Horim accepts. Without further delay for having ruined everything, the hero remembers that his father always told him to think before acting, and jokes with everyone, saying his father will make him go hungry for 3 days straight again if he sees what happened. Then, while everyone laughs, Hojong comments that he hopes no one there is close to his father, and to apologize further, he says he will serve a glass of liquor to everyone at the banquet tomorrow. Also, he will be happy if they can overlook his rudeness with an open mind. However, Unexpectedly, Lord Pain Daeho interrupts the apologies, calling it nonsense. But to the hero's luck, he only interrupted to say that one glass wouldn't be enough for his body, and energizing everyone even more, he shouted for them to get drunk together until they could forgive the protagonist. In the end, the guests left thinking well of the protagonist's personality and excited for the banquet. Also very happy with how Ayan handled the situation, which was totally different from Hyeon. Hojong, in turn, is content that he still has plenty of time, and Pang Manho calls for Hamyeon, knowing his nickname Steelwit of the Poison Dragon. Then, while Yangshin remains lying on the ground, the two go out to chat a bit. The next day, at the restaurant where the meeting is held, while everything goes smoothly, suddenly someone introduces himself as Captain Chuzon of the guard in charge of protection. Trying to be as clear as possible, he asks the protagonist to leave the place before the banquet begins. Obviously, the younger one questions what he just heard, but the captain reaffirms that the boy must leave the mansion before the banquet at noon. And for some reason, Hyeon seems totally complicit with this. Understanding that he'll need to pay attention to this, the hero sets his chopsticks on the table and asks if he really has to leave and the reason for being expelled. Chujung, in turn, explains that the boy is the one who ruined the successor gathering and has an extensive record. Therefore, he himself decided that the boy is not qualified to participate in the meeting. Faced with this, Jipyeong shouts that they already resolved the issue the previous day, and it was decided that his brother would apologize today. However, Chujung finds this attitude questionable, seeing as the hero simply came to eat casually without seeming to reflect. In this case, once again, the captain asked both of them to leave as soon as possible, but the younger one shouts that he wants to say one more thing. Jipyeong states that the captain is nothing more than a guard from one of the clans and doesn't have the right to judge the qualification of a successor from another. But Chuzon just smiles, impressed by the boy's ignorance. He explains that since the Nambone clan is the host of this meeting, it means someone like him has the right to get rid of the rabble that could be a problem for the gathering. At this moment, the captain believes that the second young master was generous enough to end things yesterday, but he is different. So he asks once more for them to leave before they start humiliating themselves. Faced with this, the hero calls his younger brother and unexpectedly puts some food in his mouth while explaining that they need to eat before it gets cold. After all, it would be a shame to waste a meal because of a barking dog. Still ignoring the situation, the hero asks if he should request for the food to be reheated. However, that is enough for the captain to stop all the conversation with a stomp on the ground. Chuzon questions what the hero just said, but he simply asks him not to make so much noise, and mocks by saying that the owner should come fetch the dog soon because it must be hungry from barking so much. In this case, the captain loses any patience he had and draws his sword to defend his honor. Then Hyeon intervenes, ordering the squad leader not to do anything foolish there. However, our hero continues mocking, saying that the dog's owner has arrived. Meanwhile, a certain beggar eats heartily but feels a little annoyed by the amount of trouble this meeting is causing. Anyway, he likes it because no one is paying attention to how he eats, and he likes it even more upon realizing that the focus of the conflict is young Master Yeon, who defeated Mabang, wanting to see how this will end. Back to the matter, Hyeon states that his clan will not overlook a humiliation towards a guard captain. The hero believes he was the one humiliated there. And to explain himself, he asks if the boy is so afraid that he orders an old man to do his dirty work. Obviously, Hyeon denies being afraid of anything, but the hero has no intention of insisting. After all, he knows the boy holds resentment because of his younger sister, but in this situation, the ideal would be to challenge him like a true warrior. And by placing him at the center of the problem instead of the subordinate, everyone expects a response, which surprises Hyeon when Sangwei is mentioned. In this case, trying to deflect the focus from himself, the boy shouts for the protagonist to stop with those speculations, saying there's no chance he gave any order because such thinking is humiliating. However, the protagonist also gives him the option of saying he didn't order anything, because that way there would be no problem in teaching a lesson to the guard captain who humiliated another clan on his own. Thus, the hero leaves two options, either to scold him or for the master to teach his subordinate himself. Faced with this, Chuzong speaks up, saying he can take responsibility for his actions because everything he did was his decision. And so the hero asks if he can also take responsibility through a simple duel, because only after teaching the captain a painful lesson will they be able to proceed with the successor, duel, and build a friendship among everyone. Thus, the warrior accepts, and Hojong asks him not to go back on his word. Meanwhile, young Master Horam now seems to be enjoying the situation. Later, a meeting happens to discuss the hero's opponent known as Lightning Knight Chushan. That's because he is known as a powerful warrior who allegedly subdued 30% of the bandits in Henaman and Hui by himself. Faced with this, Ayan comments that Pyong should have stopped it, and she knows the protagonist is strong. However, the younger one says he tried, but that his brother isn't someone who does what others ask. And now they cannot retreat from this issue because even ignoring his brother's honor, the honor of the young clan cannot fall. Ayan, in turn, shouts that they can't let it end like this, so her brother asks if she wants to go to the training field to watch. And quite proactively, he already hands over the outer garments he had set aside for her, which makes her simply grab them and run while putting them on, leaving the boys fed up with the girl's behavior. Heading to the training field where the duel will happen, the guard captain asks if the protagonist is ready, and after showing a bit of his skills, Hojang prepares his combat stance. However, to show superiority, the captain announces that he will allow the hero 3 free attacks, and when questioned, he reaffirms it. Because in his view, it's the least he should do to be responsible when dealing with a kid. But instead of being happy, the hero sees it as a way of underestimating his strength. Ready to fight, the protagonist stares at his opponent for a few seconds until he returns to a normal standing position. Then, a bit curious about the reason for this, Chuzhong asks if the boy isn't going to fight, and the hero responds that he changed his mind because he wants to know if the captain will take responsibility for what he just said. In the case, he draws his sword before the 3 strikes. Hojang makes it clear that his head will fly. Thus, all the spectators are surprised, unable to understand this stance, including Horim, who cannot identify the spear technique being used. Meanwhile, Haiyan wanted to ask what the guard leader was doing, but even the loudest shouts didn't reach his ears, because suddenly, the sensation of a giant axe approaching overwhelms all his senses. For the first strike, the protagonist brings his weapon down vertically against the captain's defenses, and Chuzhong manages to defend, but he also deeply feels the power behind the opponent's attack. Without wasting time, the hero prepares the second strike, which this time is a thrust, and due to the increased strength, the leader is nearly pierced. With his clothes torn, the captain's concern reaches an extreme level, especially because now it's time for the third strike, which consists of consecutive thrusts like the previous one. Thus, the captain realizes he has no other choice to avoid death except to defend himself. And that's what he does, drawing his sword and knocking the protagonist back. With his armed battle stance, Chuzhong does not allow himself to make another mistake because he has been through many trials. And he knows that if he hadn't blocked correctly, he probably wouldn't still be there. In any case, the hero states that the guard leader has failed and now reminds him of what he had just said. From the beginning, the agreement was that if he couldn't endure the 3 attacks, he would be eliminated. So Hojang says he will make him pay the price for being so talkative and charges in to end the fight. From the stands, the Peng brothers analyze the situation seriously, and Manhwa confirms with his brother something he had already been thinking. To the two of them, it seems the winner had already been decided. Back in the duel, Chuzhong becomes more and more worn down as the protagonist's strikes come at him, and one in particular manages to overpower the captain's strength, making his own sword strike his head, causing a stunning effect that lasts long enough for Hojang to throw a blade in his direction. The warrior narrowly dodges it, but now another strike is coming in to finish the fight. So Chuzhong uses a technique called lazy donkey roll to roll to a safe spot in the arena. However, even though he's alive, using such a technique humiliates the young man, especially since he holds his honor as captain in high regard. Thus, Chuzhong finally releases all of his aura and apologizes for showing such an indecent side as a brigade leader of the Nambon clan. However, just as he was about to continue his words of courage, he was attacked. So all that cordiality vanished, and with intense fury in his eyes, Chuzhong charged forward with everything he had. In response to the assault, Hojang throws blades he has with him to slow the warrior down. Then Chuzhong responds with the technique 3 life-hunting swords, which is a very dangerous throwing style that almost hits the hero, worrying the younger brother greatly. To regain his advantage, the hero once again uses the footwork of static singularity. During his attacks, Chuzhong can't understand why everything is vibrating in such a strange way. And even when he lands a thrust, it only hits the protagonist's defense field, being deflected back at the captain himself. That's the power of the 12 Northern Celestial Walls, which not only reflects but also disables the warrior's wrist. At that moment, the captain nears defeat, and in his eyes, the protagonist only seems to be growing stronger. Then, with one last breath of energy, Chuzhong grabs his sword with his left hand to try and defeat the boy. However, our hero also begins to use aura, unluckily for his opponent. Thus, the two launch into consecutive strikes, and the brigade leader uses all his strength to overcome the challenge. But the moment the protagonist uses the wild beast spear art, the image of the attack approaching frightens Chuzhong so much that he loses concentration, and is inevitably overwhelmed by the hero's successive blows, who passes by the captain, leaving him in a state that clearly defines his victory. Having watched everything up to now, the Peng brothers are satisfied with the outcome, but the hero doesn't stop advancing. So as he approaches to finish Chuzhong, the spectators shout for someone to stop him. In an instant, the tip of the spear nears the captain's face, but someone really does appear to defend him. It's the same beggar from before the banquet who just wanted to eat without being judged. But the hero immediately recognizes him because this person was someone important from his past, none other than the leader of the beggars' sect himself. Upon hearing that suggestion, the man comments that he's truly worthy of that title. Then, while forcing himself to block the attack, Dukseng asks the hero to tell his master to retire soon. Anyway, the beggar acknowledges Hojang's strength and asks to talk because his injuries are starting to hurt a lot. In this case, the hero asks why he did that, but even if a mistake cost him his hand, Dukseng doesn't have much self-respect. Changing the subject, the beggar asks how Hojang knows him, since he doesn't remember ever begging in the Yun clan. Hojang says he just heard rumors about him being the future master of the beggar's sect, but instead of being happy, that only confuses the young man. In any case, Dukseng is still the same as before, where they used to be drinking buddies in the past. But the hero only met him after he became the Black Emperor, which would happen long after this point. And the strangest thing of all is that Dukseng wasn't even present at this meeting in the past. Therefore, the hero begins to think that maybe the present is changing because of his actions. Precisely because of that, he wonders if the Zhu brothers would still be okay if he hadn't visited the Thorny Melody Pavilion. Returning the hero's focus, the beggar nudges him to inform him that there are many people waiting to talk to him. Among the event participants, what they talk about most is how that display had been too much for a duel, because at that moment, the guard captain was completely defeated on the ground. In this case, realizing that everyone is confused because of him, the hero says that he truly did plan to finish him off. But Daeho speaks up, asking if the boy doesn't think he went too far. Until that moment, everyone thought it was just a simple duel, but now they wanted to know why Hojang was so aggressive. Then, believing there's no reason to hide it anymore, the hero explains what happened that morning when the guard came to see him during his meal. And so the whole story is told, turning public opinion in his favor, but now completely against young Master Hyan, the host of the event. Unsatisfied with his partner's complicated situation, Horim also joins the public's desire to judge the boy. However, unlike the others, he suggests that Hyan should have praised the subordinate more often, wanting to frame the story as if the squad leader did what he did to gain recognition. So the boy asks him to apologize since he wasn't good enough at managing his subordinate. In the end, it becomes clear that Horim is doing everything he can to shift the blame away from his colleague. However, even though both are close to getting away from responsibility, the hero comments that it's amusing to see how Horim acts like an older brother, and says that he would also act that way if his younger sibling made a mistake, even though his brother has different principles than a certain someone. Horim in turn pretends not to understand the protagonist's indirect comment, but to everyone's surprise, Hyan publicly apologizes, admitting the order he gave to Chushon as well as everything else. Horim definitely can't believe that all his efforts were in vain. But continuing, Hyan explains all his mistakes using the others as witnesses. And precisely because he is regretful, he apologizes for his lack of virtue. However, because he only did this to prevent his relationship with Manhwa from being exposed, Hojang makes a point of refusing it publicly. Sometime after that meeting ended in the late afternoon, the boy lets out all his anger by punching a wall and screaming. At the moment, he is extremely furious because of the humiliation he suffered the previous day. And the worst part was that he had been disgraced right in front of Hyan as well. So once again, he punches the wall with everything he has, showing all of his hatred. Until, after turning everything into rubble, he draws the attention of the guard, who is right behind him, and asks him to find and inform him immediately of the protagonist's location, which being a loyal guard to the young master is accepted at once. And so after the warrior leaves, Hyan is free to express even more of his desire to destroy Hojang. Back at the training hall, suddenly the protagonist calls out to Daho, which leaves the twin quite confused. Anyway, the boy simply tosses a weapon to his younger brother, who catches it also without understanding. Then to explain, the protagonist asks Daho to teach his little brother a lesson. After all, in his opinion, the youngest talent is the greatest in the young clan, but it's still undeveloped due to the boy's lack of experience. Since the duel of pride is over, our hero suggests they form bonds of friendship, as was the true purpose of this meeting. And now seeing the younger one's reaction, he accepts the conditions to fight so they can get to know each other. Without wasting time, Chipiang introduces himself and asks for Peng's guidance, which makes the young man laugh heartily, already excited to get started. With that, the other event participants pair up to do the same and finally get to fight people they've always wanted to, such as the case with Yanhua, who asks to improve her skills with Manhwa, and Ayan's ally, who asks for Dukseng's guidance, to the latter's surprise and delight. So while the two head out to enjoy themselves a bit, the young man thanks him for his goodwill. And now, since their duel was interrupted last time, the hero asks if Horim is ready for a round 2. Even without intending to interrupt all the other parallel fights happening, the one between the protagonist and the young master Mayan makes everyone stop to watch. And because the intensity of power is much higher, one of the spectators can hardly believe this is the same person who fought Chuzhang. Approaching the fight, the protagonist gives his best with a thrust, but the boy manages to defend. And despite damaging his weapon, he counters, sending the protagonist flying, which fills him with pride. But unfortunately for him, our hero repositions midair to strike again. This time it's something even Horim admits he might not be able to block. Still, the boy's reflexes save his life and his power is enough to deflect it. Until, unwilling to remain at a disadvantage, Horim activates his aura, which sparks the hero's curiosity. He charges forward as if using a sword, so the protagonist responds with his energy, turning his staff into an axe. And at the moment they cross paths, it's Horim's staff that ends up broken. Even though the boy still shows some spirit, the hero remarks that he's smart and should call it a day. And with the excuse that he's already learned enough, he says goodbye, leaving his opponent behind. But the real reason was something else, because as he walked away, images of the aura technique from the last fight flooded his mind, as the hero connected it to the day he lost his brother's life in the past. Therefore, holding back his rage for now, Hojang understood that these were the signs he needed to blame the Mayan clan. The next night, outside the palace, the protagonist continues cultivating as usual, since he's now managing to cleanse almost all of his murky K. Anyway, the boy lies down to rest a little and gaze at the moonlight while reflecting on his discovery of the Mayan clan. Clearly, Horum's innate method of ki control is the same as the martial art he witnessed. Depending on each sect's breathing technique, the method of ki control varies greatly, which is why clan leaders control who learns them. Moreover, that blade technique was hard to recognize because on that day, the assassin used a spear. Regardless, the protagonist can barely contain all his hatred from having to remember what happened. A long time ago, when the hero had no power at all, he hid behind a bamboo grove during the invasion and witnessed the attack that took Jipyeong's life. But even in that moment when the worst was happening, the younger brother never stopped thinking about his older sibling. Because that blow was fatal, and despite all the despair, the boy never looked in Hojong's direction, not even once. He turned his eyes away because he knew it might reveal his location. But it was only after the enemy disappeared that the hero's body moved, and with nothing else he could do, he simply ran, until he found a cave where he could scream and cry for 3 whole days and nights. However, by the end of that, something changed in our hero because he made a promise to himself that he was now remembering. That promise was to never again leave regrets behind. In the midst of this sorrow, Duxing appears, saying he can feel how bitter the atmosphere is. Then he scolds Hojong since all the nearby plants are dead from his killing intent. Anyway, the hero stands up and asks what brings the beggar there, to which Duxing casually responds by showing a pouch. Whatever the reason, the future leader of the beggar's sect knows the hero didn't attend the celebration today. So he came there thinking they might drink together, which Hojong not only accepted but also said he wanted the first cup. After a toast between the two with the first of many rounds, Duxing asks the hero not to worry about the second young master. After all, it's clear he wasn't spoiled, and in the eyes of the future leader of the beggars, he has a charm that draws people in. Unlike a certain someone who always walks around with a scowl on his face. Moving away from the jabs, Duxing asks the protagonist to smile more, and Hojong says he needs a reason. However, the beggar disagrees, saying one needs to smile to make the things that matter appear. In any case, Hojong changes the subject, refilling his friend's cup once again, but also takes the chance to make a request, which might confuse the guy, but the hero explains it's more of a commission for the sect than a simple request. In that case, Duxing gets excited because that's how they make a living, uncovering things in exchange for a price. But for some reason, the protagonist stands up to whisper what he wants directly into the guy's ear in a rather mysterious way. Unable to believe it, Duxing asks for confirmation, and the hero confirms it. As for the first and second requests, they won't be difficult. However, Duxing says the third will be a problem, which unintentionally discourages Hojong. So to fix his mistake, the beggar shouts that he can do it, but still asks for the reason behind it. Therefore, our hero makes it clear he has a total of 3 requests and says that if Duxing can properly figure everything out, he'll also discover the reason behind them. Sometime later, 2 people are talking about an attack, and one of them comments that since it's being ordered, it's an indirect assassination. However, the guy giving the order believes his colleague's clan owes a lot to his own. Since he doesn't hear a refusal, he takes that as acceptance of the offer and tells his partner to be ready for when he's contacted. Before anything else, Yansong, who will be the scapegoat, asks to pose a question. In the end, what he really wants to know is what grudge Hyan holds against our hero. But even though the guy denies having such feelings, Yansong bursts out laughing, saying not even a dog would believe him. After all, something like that should have been said after hiding that murderous intent in his eyes. To the young master of the Dang clan, it's obvious his partner hates the hero. But Hyan refuses to agree and says the boy should use this opportunity while he still has his pride intact. Even though he tells his colleague to shut up, Yansong comments that he was going to do it anyway, even without being asked. Then, with a confident look, the boy assures that Hojong won't return to Sichuan until his hands are covered in his blood. So sometime later, the meeting of the successors finally comes to an end, and the hero thinks he needs to return as soon as possible because there's so much to do. Since he discovered the villains' identities, he can't just stand still. He needs to expand his martial arts realm and reorganize the clan's forces. In the end, he hopes the successor of the Beggars' Union can obtain the information he asked for. Some time ago, Duxing said his early farewell, claiming it's better to strike while the iron is hot. And he said that if he wanted his requests fulfilled, he'd need to send the beggars to investigate today. So the hero asked if he should give the payment to the contact from the Beggars' Union within his clan. But Duxing waved it off, saying it wasn't necessary because all he'd need was some delicious food instead. In the end, the hero really believes his old comrade will succeed. Back in the present, the Peng brothers ask if the young masters of the Yan clan are already leaving. And the hero replies that they'll see each other again if fate allows, which makes Daho very sad since they didn't even get to drink together. However, Manhwa congratulates the younger one as he was the one who had to drink in the elder's place. Amid this good moment, someone else shows up to say goodbye to the protagonist. Ayan, persistent as always, asks the boy to have lunch with them before leaving, which Hojong refuses. Still, the hero tells the boy that he'll head to Jiangsu to be his guide at some point. But since that makes the girl jealous, he says the same goes for her. Anyway, the girl gives him a gift before he leaves. and when he asks what it is, she explains it's the shining sharpening board from her clan. Recently, the zoo have started some business related to blacksmithing, and since the company is in southeast Anhui, the girl asks Hojang to visit them. Even so, the hero still doesn't know the reason behind the gift, so the girl explains that spears and staves aren't his focus, and although she doesn't know what is, she guarantees it'll make something of quality, which the protagonist is thankful for, especially since he's not from the same clan as her. Ayan, in turn, sees no issue in helping because it was thanks to him that the first daughter and son of the Zubul clan were able to survive. That's why their father would say the exchange was worth it, so the four successors of the clans come to an understanding. And soon, along with his brother, the protagonist bids farewell to all those people. In the end, Ayan is disappointed that the boy leaves without even looking back. However, Yanwo makes a point of commenting that the protagonist truly was someone quite amazing. Even though she had only seen him for a few days, she could now understand why the Yan clan had become one of the Great Seven in such a short time. And in a slightly more reflective tone, she wonders if they'll be able to meet again, as well as what kind of relationship they'll have. Whether they'll be valuable allies or perhaps enemies who must be defeated at all costs. Which is completely different from the young master who watches everything from his balcony, so full of hatred he can't even look at Hojang. Then Haiyan once again orders his soldier because their target is leaving at this very moment. Heading to the Yang clan of the Green Mountain in the Patriarch's Hall, the administrator shows up with a scroll of news in hand. He immediately informs about the rumors that the young masters are returning to the clan, and without wasting time delivers a letter sent by the Moyan clan, which surprises the Patriarch since they have no relation to that clan whatsoever, and even more so when he reads the content of the message. Because apparently they want to combine the strength of both clans, heading to the office of the Moyan Patriarch. He also seems busy writing more of his letters, but a little bird doesn't seem concerned about that and flies down from a branch until it accidentally lands in the ink, and walks across the scroll, ruining the message with its footprints. Sensing no hostility, the little bird even approaches the Patriarch's hand with a cheerful expression. However, that was a ruthless man who didn't mind eliminating whatever was in his path. That was the exact definition of the god of the sword, Moyan Gun. Back in the office of the Yan clan Patriarch from the Green Mountain, he remains pondering over this unexpected business proposal from the Moyan clan. 300 years ago, after the Blood Religion disaster, the Moyan clan moved from Liaoning province to the middle of the central district in Hunan. And ever since they settled there, Chief Yan thought they wouldn't be interested in doing overseas business. In any case, the Patriarch's thoughts go so far that he knows this won't work out. So he asks the General Administrator to prepare a brush with plenty of ink. Taking a short break from work, the Patriarch takes a moment to feel the outdoors, which is quite cold. But precisely because of that, he also wonders if his sons are traveling without too many problems. Back on our hero's journey, everyone is exhausted except for the protagonist and the captain. Even the younger brother can barely keep himself together because of his body temperature. So the hero asks if he's okay, but the boy replies that he's not, since besides being tired, he's also hungover. Moreover, ever since Hefei, they've all been running non-stop, but instead of letting them rest, Shinmo orders the troops to line up. So the protagonist scolds him because if they don't consider stamina, they'll soon be completely drained. But once again, without even thinking about rest, the captain believes it's an opportunity for extra training when they return. Either way, Hojang asks the squad leader to stay put while he looks for something for them to eat. And even though someone offers to go in his place, the protagonist takes the lead until, upon entering an establishment, he finds it odd that no one is inside. Still, the window at the counter was open, so the boy went there to ask the hidden employee for food and water for about 30 people. But before he could even explain the situation, the definition of problem appeared for a rematch. And saying it had been a long time, the young master of the Dang clan showed himself to be responsible even of the broken arm. Faced with this, the hero starts laughing, which Yangshin interprets as a reaction of shock. But Hojang makes it clear he just finds it funny that the boy had the courage to show up even after being beaten so badly. Yangshin in turn makes it clear that the protagonist's boldness ends now. And revealing an intense purple aura in the restaurant, it's said that at this moment the hero is already affected. To explain, he asks if he's ever heard of the shadow poison. And since he hadn't heard of it, the young master of the Dang clan gets even more excited as it's understandable. The poison has no smell or color. Besides, for trash like the protagonist, the boy claims he really wouldn't even be able to notice it. However, right as he was speaking, a strike from that very same trash landed on his stomach, making him spit out his last meal as he was sent flying. The boy crashed into several things until, when he finally stopped, he began to throw everything up. Terrified, Yangshin can't understand it, because he had definitely used the poisonous energy of the three suns. And that amount of energy is more than enough to activate the shadow poison. Despite that, the protagonist walks calmly toward the boy and simply steps on his broken arm, making his screams reach the chubby one on the second floor. Faced with all that brutality, Hamyang yells at the boy to stop immediately. And better than just yelling, he comes down to the first floor along with other warriors to intimidate him. However, the hero continues with his foot suppressing the boy, unwilling to stop punishing him. So the situation gets worse for Hamyang since his young master is now being taken as a hostage. Getting straight to the point, the hero tells the chubby one to take a step forward if he doesn't want the boy's neck to be crushed. And so Hamyang follows all the instructions for the sake of his young master. However, the moment he sees an opening, he draws his weapon and seemingly lands a clean hit on the protagonist. For a moment, Hamyang believes he managed to save the young master. But in the very next moment, that illusion falls apart when the hero responds with a slap and then tells him not to think about doing something so ridiculous. Now, with the closeness between them, the protagonist demands the chubby man's weapon for himself. And not seeing an immediate response, the boy sighs in frustration before crushing Yangsen's leg this time. With nothing else to be done, Hamyang hands over the weapon, which turns out to be a steel whip. The hero quickly decides to test his new toy, making impressive movements that lead the subordinates to pull the chubby man away. So while two take the leader far from there, the rest of the Red Spider Squad gets ready to attack. And even though Hamyang shouts from afar that they're no match for the protagonist, the warriors do their duty until, inevitably, they are eliminated one by the steel whip of the very leader they were trying so hard to protect. In the end, Hamyang's eyes widen more than ever, and faced with all that brutality, he wonders if what he just witnessed isn't an illusion. After all those full-force strikes, the hero realizes he really overdid it with the weapon, because he imagined himself using the Storm Axe Chain, which would have easily dealt with his weaklings. In that case, Hojang simply thinks he'll need to find another chain to use, dropping the broken one on the ground without looking back. Faced with that humiliation, Hamyang refuses to accept defeat and charges forward with rage to finish off the boy who disrespected him. However, just at the moment he was about to strike, our hero defended himself by placing the young master between him and the attack, leaving Yangsen in an even more miserable state than before. Extremely worried, Hamyang tries to wake him up, but at that moment, the hero says something even more important. How will the patriarch of the Dang clan handle this? In Hojang's view, the chubby one will be harshly punished for injuring the son he was sent to protect. But after scaring him, a condition is given to the frightened man in order to stay alive. And that condition is to answer a simple question, which the boy thinks won't be a problem. However, not hearing an answer right away, Hojang sits down to chat a bit more first. Since that place is far from Hefei, the hero comments that they arrived there after 2 days of running through many roads. Therefore, something is definitely strange here since the Dang are natives of Sichuan. And because of that, they shouldn't have known they would take this road and end up at this restaurant. So with the cards on the table, the hero simply asks them not to make things more difficult between the two of them. And holding Hamyang by the chin, he interrogates him to find out who told them they were coming in that direction. Outside the restaurant, the younger brother sleeps while the captain takes care of a few things. But the moment he sees the protagonist returning completely covered in blood, Shimo panics, unlike Hojang himself. Quickly, the guard leader asks what happened to the boy's clothes, and then he admits that it's blood, to everyone's shock. But he also makes it clear that they don't need to worry because it's someone else's blood. Moreover, Hojang states that he already took care of everything Shimo was concerned about from what he can see. In any case, the boy warns that he didn't finish them off, even though he left them in a vegetative state. Still, Hojang admits that he took drastic measures because sometimes an unfounded rumor is stronger than a sword. Back in his homeland, in a carriage, the young master of the Namgong clan appears. However, while walking through the city, gossip is visible among the people, bringing a completely different atmosphere than usual. Wasting no time, the boy heads to his father's office to announce his return. But upon finding him, the clan leader is surrounded by scrolls filled with discarded drawings. Hayan is obviously confused about what's going on, but when he decides to look at the content, everything becomes clearer. Since he was young, the boy's father has had the habit of drawing orchids to calm his fury. And now is no different because the patriarch asks if the rumors are true, much to Hayan's despair. In the end, what the boy's father wants to know is if the rumor about him ordering Hojang's assassination using Yangshin is actually true. Of all things, what disappoints the father most is the fact that his son used a blade that wasn't his to resolve things with someone. Even so, he asks if he's wrong in making these accusations. Hayan, for his part, doesn't have the courage to deny it, but even when his sister got hurt, the patriarch didn't see his son falter. Because of that, he reflects on what reason would lead him to make such an absurd mistake. The first option would be that something shook his composure, and the second that Hojang was better than expected. However, the patriarch also considers a third, more accurate possibility, that both options are true. Because of that, the father asks if his son really likes the eldest daughter of the Zhu clan that much, and despite trying, Hayan's words can't lie. The patriarch in turn knows that the only occasion when a man becomes weak is when he falls in love, which can be seen in the current situation that has no justifications. In any case, the father says that at this moment a falcon has been sent to the Zhu clan, and since Hayan is the son of the great Namgong clan, he is more than qualified to marry their daughter. Because of this, the boy even gets a bit emotional, but the patriarch tells him not to be fooled, because he's only doing this to restore his son's composure, treating her as a tool, not a wife. In any case, Hyatt admits his defeat but assures that he won't lose again. Then, now a bit more proud of his hair, the patriarch finishes trimming the bonsai leaves and thinks maybe it's time to settle things with the Yun clan. 20 days later, the young masters finally return to Green Mountain. More precisely, to the patriarch's office, where they present themselves in the presence of the general administrator. In this case, the clan chief welcomes them and tells the youngest to go rest before serving the hero some tea, which, being drunk very quickly, startles the general administrator. Anyway, the father asks why his son is in such a state, so he replies that he trained a bit along the way, but it wasn't anything major. In summary, he ran alternating between 7-minute sprints and active walking rests, until after a while they increased the run time to 8 minutes, which made the father curious if that's what happened to Jipion. However, the hero made a point of denying it because, in truth, he had everyone in the Blue Operations Squad doing it, including the leader. All these people had been running for 20 days straight, and although it seems excessive, the hero says this is just the beginning. After all, he needs to reach the peak of martial arts since he doesn't know if he'll manage it even at the end of his life. In this case, the patriarch is able to see this training with new eyes, understanding that Hojong changed that day, and he accepts that after so long, his son has finally become an adult. Changing the subject, the patriarch mentions he heard that some unpleasant interactions happened with the Nambone clan. So the protagonist explains everything from beginning to end, but is surprised upon finishing because it's the first time he's seen the patriarch so furious. In any case, now that he understands what happened, he updates his son by saying that Chief Nambone has already apologized, along with Manhwa, who confessed her actions. In this case, the patriarch asks if the boy understands, and Hojong summarizes that it seems the patriarch abandoned his daughter to avoid shaming the heir. In the end, in a cunning way, they tried not to link the assassination attempt to the family. So the hero comments that the methods of the Nambone clan are truly surprising. Getting straight to the point, the patriarch asks if they should accept the apologies. And since a martial artist's life is always in danger, the hero is in favor to enhance their reputation. In this case, the father tells the eldest to go rest a bit, since he's been active for so long. But before leaving, he calls his son's attention again, this time to praise his actions. Thus, the protagonist's expression relaxes and he returns the gratitude with humility. The next morning, Hojong ran to the training field and dressed with many weights on various parts of his body. With everything ready, he sprinted off to train his endurance to the maximum. 2 months later, the protagonist was already able to run in the same way over water. And after 4 months, just the wind from his sprint was enough to slice bamboo in half. At a certain point, the new year arrived at the Yan clan of Green Mountain, but the boy continued training. And only after feeling complete did the protagonist on a certain day remove his weights because he had finally reached somewhere. Now with an excited expression on his face, he believes he's finally ready to face the villain. Sometime later, the beggar announced that he had completed the 3 requests, although he deeply regretted not having accepted the commission fee. Because of that, in a letter, Dukseng makes it clear that if a delicious banquet isn't prepared within half a month, he will cause a scene. However, for the protagonist, that was the least of his problems, and since the heir of the beggars said he would personally come to meet him, the fact that he came all this way just to deliver the contents of a letter can only mean 2 things. Either the information is so sensitive that it would be terrible if it leaked, or he has a lot to say. In any case, after getting all the information, Hojong knows that it's finally his turn to act. Watching everything from the top of the stairs, the clan patriarch stares at his son until he notices. Without wasting time, he asks if the boy has finished today's training, which Hojong confirms. Then the father asks him to follow, because there's something he wants to talk about right now. Naturally, the hero asks if he did something wrong, since lately he hasn't left for anything except training. Without further talk, the 2 later arrive at Bamboo Forest, the same one where they once talked about the innate key of True Blue. Soon after arriving at a certain spot, the patriarch asks his son to choose one of the weapons on the rack. And as he thinks about what this means, Hojong finally begins to understand that he is about to face his father in a duel. To be sure, he asks if the duel will be serious, and the patriarch confirms it. After all, if it weren't, there'd be no reason to bring him there. In that case, the protagonist picks a spear from the rack and starts warming up. The decision, however, surprises the patriarch quite a bit, but he simply chooses his sword as usual, and simply releases a bit of his aura, already assuming his combat stance. This is the devoted sword's dedicated key, which is the sword technique of the king's 8 children. Therefore, the hero realizes that it's for real and starts feeling even more excited. But before they begin, the father asks if the boy knows why he wants to see his martial arts today. And although it's also to check his son's growth, there is another reason. But that reason is one the patriarch will only reveal at the end of the duel, which the protagonist understands. Without further delay, our hero quickly charges forward to strike the first blow, but his father manages to deflect it far away. Since the block was so easy, the hero gets more excited than ever to launch an even stronger attack. This time, the patriarch needs to defend himself, and as the blows come, the exchange between the 2 already appears more balanced. until the hero dodges an attack to counter, spinning his center of gravity and channeling all his energy into his hand. To use the technique of the inverted dragon palm from the flying swallow palm style, the pressure from the protagonist's attack combined with the patriarch's counterstrike is enough to create gusts of wind resembling a tornado. But the hero comes out worse in this clash, even though the patriarch still finds his power impressive. In this case, since the protagonist is not yet defeated, Shifian reveals another one of his secret techniques, and because he is his son, the protagonist immediately recognizes the sword stance responsible for cutting everything in half near wherever the patriarch passes, until, in an instant, the blade approaches the protagonist's face, which he manages to dodge by luck as the damage shook the entire forest. Without even a second to breathe, the patriarch charges again, and now it's clear that the unshakable projectile sword is being used. So about to fall behind, the protagonist unleashes more of his power. As the two draw closer, the patriarch is startled to realize that his son is now determined to fight with everything he has. In response to the attack, Shifian intercepts the advance with a sword slash, so the protagonist tries to break through the defense with more strikes, which surprises the father because Hojang jumped first to reduce the power of the unshakable projectile sword. This is a continuous attack that uses the strategy of the best defense being offense. In the end, these are combat techniques made for real life or death battles. Once again, their blows collide, generating more bursts of wind, and once again coming out on the losing end, a hero is thrown far away. Even having tried several times, his father managed to defend even against the opening he created. That's why, to the hero, the patriarch is like the walls of a castle without a single flaw, with nearly complete martial arts. But it's precisely because of that Hojang gets more excited, as he'll be able to face him with all the skills he has so far. Sensing that his son is ready to keep trying, the patriarch changes his stance once more. And the moment he asks the boy to come at him, the boy replies that there's no need to ask, and he dashes forward to try to strike before the patriarch's defense is fully formed. Once again, the attacks from both sides seem equivalent, but the clash of blows still manages to destroy the entire surrounding battlefield, generating an even greater explosion visible even from outside the forest. After the attacks end, our hero remains standing in the completely devastated forest, but noticing how much his hand is trembling, he thinks he's unlucky. Even though he wants to continue, apparently, unless it's a life or death situation, it's hard to draw out the key of the white tiger. So also still standing, but in better condition, the patriarch sheathes his weapon and asks his son's opinion about his martial arts. Being quite direct, the boy comments that he got the impression that he is a martial artist seeking completeness. To the hero, this father is someone who tries to maximize all attributes, not depending on a single style, and minimizing weaknesses with martial arts that encompass everything, which is exactly the case with Shifian. The father, in turn, asks if the son is sure, and Hojang agrees. Then, understanding things better, he comments that he had hoped his son would take the same path as him. Setting aside his role as patriarch and father, Yen explains that he wanted his children to follow in his footsteps. But now that they've crossed blades, he understood that the boy will follow a different path. After all, it's now more than clear that Hojang has no intention of becoming patriarch. Regardless of his feelings, the patriarch confirmed today that what Hojang seeks isn't here, but could be something that extends to the whole world. In the end, that was the reason for today's duel, because after all that training, the father wanted to offer the position of vice patriarch to his son. He wanted to know if Hojang desired it through his martial arts. However, even a father cannot control his children. In any case, the patriarch asks his son to show those impressive martial arts more often when he can. But before he leaves, the protagonist calls his father's attention, making him stop for a second. Because now Hojang wants to make it clear that even if their paths are different, his heart will always be with Yan. Therefore, even if he is called a demon or dishonored to protect the clan, our hero declares that he will point his blade at the world if necessary. However, faced with that statement, the patriarch says it's a bunch of nonsense. After all, if the world dares to call his son a demon, then that same world will have to face his sword. Without further words, the father tells his son to go rest, and later in the evening, the hero finally lies down. At this moment, the day begins to replay in his mind because he was offered the position of vice patriarch. And that was something Hojang never thought would be offered to him instead of Jipiang. Anyway, the boy turns over and gets some sleep and silently apologizes to his father for having to take care of other things first. Right now, if he doesn't stop the villain, the Yan clan will have no future at all. And the three cults trying to devour the central district are still vivid in Hojang's mind. In the end, all of this information racing through his head gives the hero a terrible headache. That same night in the patriarch's chamber, he reflects while drinking tea under the moonlight. Hojang's words remain clear in the patriarch's mind, so he wonders what his wife would say. Faced with this, the general administrator Taekyung asks if the lord didn't like the taste of the tea while complaining about the cold. Getting straight to the point, he says he received a response from the Moyang clan and promptly hands it to the patriarch to read for himself. It seems the Moyang are still insistent on proposing business relations between the two clans, so Taekyung is asked for his opinion. And without even thinking, the administrator is in favor, since the Moyang are highly influential in the Murim. That's why, if the business becomes profitable, they'll be able to help more people during the summer floods. Obviously, this is a point Chief Yeon understands, but still, in case they have different plans with them. The general administrator suggests that the daughter of the Moyang clan could solve that if the patriarch marries her to the first young master. After a deafening silence in the hall, Taekyung confirms his suggestion to the clan chief. Because Yamwei is not only intelligent but also worthy of marrying the first young master due to her kind personality. Since, in the administrator's eyes, the hero will become patriarch in the future, he will need someone by his side to protect him. So being advice from someone he trusts, Lord Yeon seriously considers it, as he still wishes for Hojong to follow in his footsteps. 10 days later, outside the mansion, while the brothers were talking, Duxing finally appeared with good news. But before anything else, he made sure to ask if the banquet was ready, since he hadn't eaten in 3 days. To which the hero replied that if the beggar left even a single grain of rice behind, he wouldn't get the soup. Later, already inside the palace, Duxing thanks for the meal and finishes eating everything in seconds, making Jipyeong think of him as a gluttonous monster. In this case, the beggar laughs at being underestimated, saying that in the past he could easily eat 6 kilos of pork. So while the little one tries to calculate how many people it would take to eat that, the hero offers tea. But Duxing shouts that he wants alcohol, not caring that it's only midday. Even though he's against it, the protagonist doesn't refuse, so Jipyeong goes to fetch it. Since he has now received his part of the deal, the beggar decides to start talking business. The first request was about reporting what was going on in the Murim, but there was nothing particularly important, aside from fraudulent monks from the small Temple of Thunder appearing. To be more specific, the hero asked about cultists disturbing people's lives. But there were no demonic worshippers either, which made Hojong think that the 3 cults still haven't made their move. Regarding the second request, it was about Moyang Gun's younger brother named Moyang Wu. So the beggar hands over a scroll saying the details are written there. However, while the hero reads, Duxing can't help but grow curious about the reason for this inquiry. In any case, what's written refers to maritime trades with Zhejiang province, which Duxing confirms since Wu is in charge of that branch of the clan, generating profits equivalent to all of Moyang's funds. That's precisely why the beggar comments that he seems like a talented man, and he finds it interesting that his personality is quite different from that of his brothers. However, the hero already knew that because in the past, Wood begged his brother for care even while being rejected and bowed to Hojong. In the end, he truly was a humble and benevolent man, so if the hero wants to unify the orthodox factions, he will need him. Because unlike the unorthodox ones, something like that is impossible with strength alone. Now about the final request, before revealing it, the beggar asks if he can ask something first. And the moment he's given permission, he asks how the boy found out. More precisely, how he discovered the identity of the strongest in the world, as well as how the Mayan clan had been secretly training the Sword of Death to grow stronger. Sometime later, while miners work to collect resources, those responsible for the expedition observe everything from above. Soon one of them asks how things are going, and what seems to be the assistant comments that it will be finished in 3 days. Then, once the work is done, the chief orders all the workers to be buried. This is the cruel patriarch of the Mayan clan, named Mayan Chun. Changing the subject, the chief seems excited, so Chun admits that he is, because in a short time, the martial arts of his ancestors will be in his hands. 300 years ago, the descendants of the Mayan, along with the martial emperors in the 4 directions, repelled the blood religion. In the end, only part of the martial arts was passed on, and until today, the patriarch believed the rest had been lost. However, now the martial arts in the 4 directions have been found, and if he learns them, Chun believes he will surpass even the 13 of Sangshin. With that, Chun asks if they already received a response from the Moyang clan, but is informed that the Yeon are causing delays. In that case, Chun thinks of Moyang Gun as truly a soft-hearted man. And if the Yeon clan rejects them again this time, the patriarch asks for them to be discarded. But more than that, Chun asks if his servant isn't just as curious as he is, because now they are in possession of the lost martial arts of the clan. And with all of his power in hand, Chun is eager to test them to see how long the Yeon can survive. In an icy forest near the palace, a projectile is launched at a tree, creating a hole in the middle. But this is just part of our hero's training after discovering the truth about the villain. Some time ago, the moment he heard the news, our hero's aura was completely released, frightening Duxing, and even with the boy trying to calm Hojong, the boy's powers seemed to be out of control. Because of this, the future leader of the beggars was thrown far away, and as the pressure increased, Duxing began to feel a sharp pain in his heart, until finally the protagonist managed to calm down. The truth was, he had already started to lose hope, and now that he had discovered the Mayang were to blame, the fire in his heart was burning and he couldn't stay still. For now, all this training was to release the anger for those who laid a hand on his father, and for burying his brother after burning all the members of his family along with his home. Naturally, the hero remains out of control for a long time and only returns to normal after much destruction. Faced with this, the patriarch appears with a precise judgment that this is not training. Therefore, understanding it to be related to anger, he asks what is bothering his son. But Hojong responds that it's nothing serious, saying he just lost patience due to his slow progress. In that case, the patriarch comments that the son's skills already compare to those of a clan leader, but precisely because of this, he hands him a secret book to help with the boy's development. As all the hero's martial arts are based on brute attacks, his stamina is heavily consumed, which makes it good to learn a counterattack technique. And in this book, which aims to enhance martial arts, is the Dragon Spear counterattack. With that, the hero thinks that when he awakens his full powers, counterattacking won't be a problem. But obviously, he believes he shouldn't compare what he already has with this secret book personally prepared by his father. So he thanks the patriarch for his consideration, who then asks if his son is thinking of leaving, and Hojong says it was supposed to be in the morning, since it will be difficult to protect the family alone. But soon the patriarch will understand how strong they are. In any case, before that, the father asks his son to come along because he has a gift prepared. Thus, in the clan's commercial streets after midnight, the two arrive at a certain residence in the center, and soon the protagonist identifies the place where they are. Then the patriarch enters asking if the old man is already awake. And so after wiping his hands from his work, the blacksmith Byam Yigang comments that he had been expecting them. While the protagonist tries to understand what's going on, the blacksmith says the commission item is already finished. And whether it was difficult or not, he says it was nothing out of the ordinary, since it only took 15 days to make. In any case, now is the moment to reveal his latest masterpiece. And in a way that leaves the protagonist impressed, it is revealed to be a massive steel axe. For a moment, our hero still doesn't understand, so the patriarch asks what he's waiting for to wield it. With a handle almost 2 meters long, the weapon looks powerful and sturdy in Hojong's hands, and the weight of the axe is transferred to him. So the boy tests it with a vertical slash, and when asked if he liked it, he comments on it being quite heavy. However, it's still great, and that was exactly what his father wanted to hear. With the weapon delivered, the two say goodbye to the blacksmith and move away from the old man's house until later returning to that forest. Before his son leaves, the patriarch asks if there's a chance he's thinking about getting married. Then the protagonist says he's not, but asks if a good partner was found. In that case, Chifian asks what the hare thinks of the daughter from the Moyang clan, as she is someone of great intelligence and many talents. Hojong, in turn, asks why it has to be the Moyang clan when there are several others. And in response, the patriarch reveals the business proposal made. Therefore, there are cases where clans marry to strengthen relations. However, noticing the boy's startled expression, Chifian asks him to pretend he didn't hear it, because he too is against loveless marriages. But what the hero was actually thinking about was the reason the Moyang suddenly wanted to cooperate. Before returning and after the Yan clan of Green Mountain was annihilated, the one called the strongest in the world was the Moyang clan. At the same time, the Mayong slowly began to deteriorate, but the confusion was that for some reason, the Moyang suddenly fell into obscurity. Putting together all the information about maritime trades and invasions, the heroes still can't shake a strange feeling of discomfort. So since the father he knew would never suggest a marriage for commercial reasons, Hojong asks if someone else recommended it. And the moment the name of the general administrator Taekyung is heard, everything becomes clear. The administrator is someone with a calm expression and a gentle smile, modest, but still holding an executive position in the clan's finances. To avoid bad feelings, the father also comments that he too suggested making Hojong the patriarch. However, the hero wasn't angry about the marriage suggestion, but about something he always knew, and which he had just confirmed: the existence of a traitor in the family. Sometime later in the icy winter, the administrator arrives at his house covered in snow, until he's startled by the reception of the protagonist, who is sitting in his armchair. Obviously, the administrator is frightened, so the hero says he came to discuss some matters. And since things are not yet fully clear, Hojong asks for a minute of his time. To welcome the young master properly, the general administrator prepares some tea. Then the hero soon asks if it was him who suggested his marriage, and believing he would be criticized, he bows and apologizes for overstepping. However, to his surprise, Hojong denies any kind of upset and even praises the action, saying there isn't a man who doesn't want to marry a beautiful woman. Nevertheless, his criticism is that the general administrator is having a narrow view of things. Hojong sincerely admits that Yangwei is a very beautiful and elegant woman, but the hero says that such a woman is a hindrance, because she is the type who devours her husband instead of serving him. In this case, the protagonist approaches to ask the general administrator for a favor regarding his father. And once again, to Taekyung's surprise, what the young master asks for is to be introduced to another potential wife. To explain himself, the protagonist says that he must marry anyway, but he wants a beautiful woman who isn't Yanhwa, because that way he'll be one step closer to the position of leader of the Yan clan of Green Mountain. Faced with that, the general administrator asks what the hero is talking about, because as the eldest son, the young master is the rightful heir. But all the hero asks is to trust him, because the reason for his father's suggestion is already something everyone knows. And to convince him even more, Hojong says he will always remember Taekyung's work while fulfilling his duty for the clan's future. Thus, it works as the administrator accepts the orders, and then before leaving, the hero simply asks once again to trust him. The next morning in the clan chief's office, the general administrator delivers the list of documents that need to be reviewed. And so, while the patriarch reads everything, Taekyung takes the initiative to call his attention for a moment to comment on the young master's marriage. And to the patriarch's surprise, what is being discussed is about introducing someone else instead of Yanhwa. In this case, Lord Yeom closes the document to ask the reason for this, and Taekyung states that Yanhwa would be a wonderful wife. However, he believes another woman would be more suitable to comfort the young master, especially since there is also the possibility of the Moeon refusing. To explain the reason for the refusal, the administrator comments that she is highly valued in the clan, so if the leader agrees to offer her, it would hinder business. With that, the two look at each other for a while in a deafening silence, until the patriarch asks if working with the Moeon clan is really that important, and Taekyung affirms that it is. Because if they can make more money working with them, he guarantees they will be able to improve the quality of life for the people. With that, since he cares deeply about his people's well-being, the patriarch says he will accept. Then the administrator says he will send the message, and regarding the wife, you will find another that isn't Yanhwa. With nothing more to say, Taekyung prepares to leave, but before that, the patriarch calls him once more. However, this time it's to thank him for his good work, to which the administrator replies that he is already happy to help the clan. Sometime later, the general administrator delivers the letter that should be sent to the Moeon clan. But this time he seems much happier than usual, especially because the journey so far has been extremely difficult. At the moment, he doesn't know if it's been 8 or 10 years, but today both families will end up in ruins. And now, the patriarch will use business as an excuse to gradually take over the territories of the young clan of Green Mountain one by one. Furthermore, Taekyung thinks that Miss Yama was also incredible in using herself as a tool to confuse the judgment of the judiciary. In any case, the administrator continues to wear his good guy mask as always. But now the leader of his clan is one step away from becoming the strongest in the world, along with him who will benefit from it. And that is exactly why Taekyung cannot wait to see the rise of the Moeon clan. That same night, back at his home, a wonderfully fragrant Longjing tea is served. Then the protagonist asks how the administrator managed to get something like that, and Taekyung replies that he spent all his savings. However, he intended to give it to the clan leader, but with this new alliance, Hojang comments that he is not an ordinary person. Taekyung, in turn, laughs a lot, saying it's an exaggeration, but the hero states that he is the one who controls this family. In that case, from now on, the administrator says he will work only by the hero's side. And as Taekyung's decision to betray the patriarch becomes clear, the hero simply pours all that expensive tea onto the floor. With the lights out, Hojang comments that he hopes the administrator really plays a major role in the future of the Yan clan. But now, what he really wants to know is whether Taekyung will reveal where the rest of the rats are hiding. In a completely direct way, the protagonist questioned if the general administrator would expose the others. But even though he hit the mark in his deduction, Taekyung kept pretending not to understand. Therefore, already very irritated, the hero crushes the teacup, stating that the man is a spy. Trying to avoid this, Taekyung says he is too cowardly to be a spy, but the hero reminds him of his 3 rules. According to the administrator himself, when planting a spy, he should be placed in a discreet location with a discreet position and personality. However, Taekyung made sure to do exactly the opposite, having the audacity to manage finances alongside the patriarch. So the hero stated seriously that he was not a common spy, but a special one. Even now, the general administrator comments that it seems to be a misunderstanding, but Hojang decides to make things clear. So he calls for the successor of the Beggar's clan, and without delay, Duxing appears from where he was hidden. Despite not wanting to get involved in another clan's fight, the letter that was sent was not a simple response, but a report to the Moeon clan in a code they had many difficulties deciphering. Faced with this, Taekyung finally begins to tremble, unable to believe how that ended up in their hands. Then the hero sits down to say one last time that it's better for the spy to stop pretending now, and leaves the choice to him to leave on his own or be dragged out, making Taekyung understand his fate. Sometime later in the city prison, the general administrator is escorted by 2 guards to his cell. And throughout the entire way, he shows no expression, even when he is thrown inside. Upon locking him up, the guard said he never expected something like this from the general administrator. Then, slamming the cell shut, he demanded Taekyung explain how he could do this after 10 years in the clan, as well as how he could dare to make fools of them with that shameless expression on his face. In the end, the guard was calmed by his friend, but before leaving, he made it clear that Taekyung should prepare himself, because he certainly wouldn't have an easy death. Thus, already alone in the cell, the general administrator begins to reflect while looking out the window. Under the moonlight, at a certain moment, he sits down to recite a kind of prayer, one that speaks of a man who can hear and who can speak beyond the northern skies and the other great heavens. At the end, just as he finishes speaking, the key falls through the window, and already knowing what it meant, Taekyung wastes no time and begins searching the walls. Because somewhere in the wall there was a lock, which he found within seconds. Thus, a secret passage opens at the lower part of the cell, and determined to escape, Taekyung faces the passage, leaving the place completely empty. At the same time, returning from the prison inspection, a guard asks his friend Niall if he saw anything unusual. He also asks why he is there since he is responsible for another area, but the boy says he is helping out. In any case, Niall complains about being hungry, which leads to him being criticized for being too relaxed in this situation. However, the boy doesn't seem to care much, especially since the general administrator has already been revealed as a spy and is now in prison. So his colleague gives Niall some money to go buy food quickly, and as he walks away, the first guard just keeps judging him more. The thing was, there was a reason for that guard to act so relaxed. But when he entered the designated spot in the mansion with the food, for some reason, no one was there even though it was so late at night. Then the protagonist appeared, asking if the food had gotten cold and suggesting other nearby places, although saying he wouldn't force the boy to go if he didn't want to, as well as joking that if Niall was okay with cold rice, he could eat it just fine. The guard, in turn, acts quickly, throwing that rice bowl at the protagonist's face, and even though he didn't accept it, that was just to create an opening to escape through the ceiling. But upon reaching the upper level, he found himself even more surrounded from above. Therefore, the hero says that his contact who was at the stables has already been caught by the Blue Operations Squad. And now, with no more way to escape, the spy is ordered by our hero to come down to him. Heading to the Patriarch's room, he polishes his sword while thinking about everything that is happening. But at a certain moment, he lets go of it to test the blade's sharpness, which with a single movement slices off a piece of the table. Thus, the head of the young clan observes the atmosphere, prepared to act for whatever happens. Back at the upper part of the roof, the Blue Guard squad surrounds the spy who can barely contain his frustration, because having to obey the protagonist and go down to where he is. Soon, the intruder asks who the boy is, but the strange thing is that he doesn't recognize the face of the first young master. However, to Niall, there's no way a pampered kid like him would have full knowledge of the invasion of the clan. But assuming he knows the conditions under which he was pampered, Hojong simply gets tired of hearing rats making noise at this hour, and orders the spy to kneel already so he can finish him off. Obviously, valuing his life, Niall chooses to attack our hero instead of surrendering. But even after trying several times, all his attacks are easily blocked. Niall realizes this and considers that the boy even knows about the poison on the tips of his fingers. However, the spy still has hope because he only needs to scratch Hojong once. But even if victory were that easy, it wouldn't be possible without hands, especially feeling all the pain Niall is feeling now. In any case, the hero comments that apparently the boy wasn't even prepared to take his own life, and because of that, he intimidates him by questioning whether he really deserves all that self-confidence. Until, with one more merciful strike, the protagonist eliminates the rat from his clan, and walks away without even looking back while Niall remains on the ground under the full moonlight. Meanwhile, somewhere in the frozen forest of the Yan clan, the former general administrator runs at full speed to escape. But he stops when he hears a voice asking if that was all. Revealing himself as the Patriarch, he asks if he was deceived just to witness this pathetic sight of his general administrator. Still hopeful, Taekyung begs the clan leader to let him go. But since the Patriarch does not accept the request, he argues that if his lord learns of his death, the Yan will face hard times. So be pleased to be spared so that won't happen, though he hadn't expected the consequences of the spy who infiltrated, and because of the contact who was in the stable. After that was discovered, there was no one left to report Taekyung's death since everyone had met the same fate. In the end, the Patriarch makes it clear that his son is quite capable despite being underestimated. So while Taekyung trembles with rage, he is only asked if he has any last words. But at the moment the former general administrator was about to open his mouth to curse his son, the Patriarch finished him off once and for all. And with the traitor's remains on the ground, the clan leader made sure to say that his last words were disgusting, so he had heard enough of them. 5 days later, many soldiers gather around the palace for the ceremony displaying the traitor. But the Patriarch remains in his office, thinking about recent events, because his son had informed him that the Moyeon clan was joining forces with the Mayeon. And even though he couldn't reveal all the details, the Patriarch took his son's warning seriously, who was now training as usual in the bamboo forest. To prepare for what was coming, our hero dedicated himself to training. And now he knew who was responsible for wanting the end of the clan, since the Mayeon were training with a death sword, while the Moyeon had planted the spies. However, our hero remembers that past of destruction and becomes determined to act this time. Therefore, with a completely different posture than usual, he shows the result of his practice, with a simple axe swing strong enough to shake the entire structure of the forest. Sometime later, the protagonist returns to the palace along with Dukseng, and because he is taking too long, Hojong asks him to accompany him. However, suddenly the future leader of the beggars feels something approaching from behind. But at the same moment it was sensed. This person approached at an unreal speed, jumping over the two. Then at the last moment, Dukseng tries to shout to warn the young master of the enemy attack. But that wasn't necessary because the protagonist managed to defend himself easily. However, what drew the most attention was not that, but the fact that the attacker was actually the second young master, Jupyeon, which also surprised Hojong. In any case, the younger brother keeps attacking without even waiting, leaving Dukseng increasingly confused. But among the attacks exchanged between the two, one nearly hit the protagonist, cutting off a piece of his hair. So the hero responded with a spinning strike that only didn't finish the brother off because it was stopped at the last instant. And thus the young man finally stopped attacking and began to laugh as expected, since he couldn't beat his older brother. In any case, Hojang praises the younger one's attempt by saying that if he had let his guard down, he would have lost. But the boy understands that if he doesn't hurry to reach his older brother's level, he'll lose to a certain person. Changing the subject, he asks if Hojang is already leaving, and upon hearing that he is, he asks to say something before his departure. However, Hojang lies that he will return soon because from now on, the road ahead will be a path of blood. And precisely because of that, he doesn't want the younger one to get involved in it again. However, all the younger brother wanted was to ask Hojang to be careful on his journey, and so he said goodbye to the hero along with the future leader of the beggar sect. But that was also a lie because Jipyeong planned to go after his brother at some point. Later, in a mountainous area with present vegetation and a living fauna, a little bird flies from its branch to rest on the shoulders of the Moyeon clan's patriarch, Moyeon Gun, during his training, until his daughter appears to warn that her father might catch a cold like that. But even though it's a little cold, Gun believes it's been a long time since the weather has been this nice. In any case, his daughter came to deliver the report from the spies in the Moyeon clan, as the patriarch had succeeded in finding the ancient martial arts. And after finding them, he immediately buried hundreds of workers, as expected of someone so cruel. In this case, Gun gets dressed and asks about the Yeon clan's response regarding the dealings, but since they haven't replied yet, Yeon comments that the leader is cautious. Gun, for his part, knows that Yeon is a great man who fulfills his duties, but when his daughter informs him that the spies haven't reported much, even though it's the 5th report, the information seems strange to them both. However, Gun believes that since they planted so many spies, it's impossible to discover them all, and he trusts Taekyeon deeply. Cutting the conversation short, a servant appears to inform them that an information control has been imposed in Jiangsu, and it is expected that the connection with the spies will be cut. In this case, the patriarch understands that some information specialist may be helping the Yan clan, which upon thinking about it reminds Yanhwa of the successor of the beggar clan at the meeting. But even though his plans are being frustrated, Gun simply releases his aura with a very cheerful smile on his face, and using his electricity powers, with just one motion, he launches a burst of energy to the bottom of the ravine, which, in a matter of seconds, splits the entire mountain in half as if it were butter. Then, with this demonstration of power, Gun states that they'll have to bury the Yan clan faster than expected. 5 days later, in a pavilion in Henam Shangchu, while nothing is happening, Duxing takes the chance to eat as much as he can, which obviously shocks the other people. However, what draws the most attention is the sound when the protagonist's axe hits the ground, chipping off a splinter. Because the moment he picks it up, everyone starts to pay attention to the size of the weapon, confused about how the skinny boy can hold something like that. Returning to the table, the hero asks his companion to eat more slowly since he's not going to steal his food. But Duxing insists on telling him to shut up because he was forced to run non-stop from Jiangsu to there, and it's the first time he's ever felt this hungry. Precisely because of that, the beggar lets out all his anger. But Hojang resolves it instantly by letting him eat as much as he wants on his tab. Then, changing the subject, Duxing quickly asks when the protagonist is going to explain. Since at the moment they are in Hinam, which is a region far from the Moyeon clan but very close to the Moyeon clan. The beggar is dying to know the reason they're there. But to answer that, the hero says the reason is very simple. At that very moment, the information that the hero is in Henam Shankyu reaches Patriarch Gun, as expected. But he still has no idea why they're there, and all the spies have been defeated because the beggars are controlling the province. Furthermore, Hojang didn't give him time to think, since they moved very quickly. In the end, what the hero believes is that the Patriarch will become anxious to try to make contact at any cost, which is exactly what the daughter had suggested, though Gun sensed something was unclear. For a moment, the thought crossed Gun's mind that the alliance had been discovered, but his confidence in his spies was greater. Then, knowing the person, the protagonist denies that they'll receive any kind of message because he knows the Patriarch won't make a move, since he is not the type of person to act without being certain. Precisely for that reason, the order Gun gave was to demand contact, but by using the Moyeon clan as a shield to find out what he wants without revealing himself. 6 days later, finally someone shows up at that same restaurant asking about the first young master of the Yeon clan, so the hero asks who he is. But rudely, the guy simply tells Hojang to set aside some time because the Moyeon clan wants to see him, which luckily for him wasn't a problem since that's exactly what the hero wanted. Later, at the beginning of the night, the two arrive at the place where their leader will speak. But before approaching the campfire, the guy from before asks the hero to drop the axe, which he obviously ignores with a smile until the leader asks to leave him alone. Because even she wants to know what that huge axe is, as she heard the main weapon of the Yan clan is a sword. Furthermore, the leader of the Moyeon clan's assassin squad, named Moyeon Onji, asks if it isn't too heavy to carry that around. And to respond, the hero drops the axe, creating a hole in the ground, then states that it's light, which Onji finds very funny and praises Hojang for being so bold. In any case, she asks where the beggar is, but the hero denies knowing and asks why she's there. Onji, in turn, says the night is long so they can talk, but Hojang immediately makes clear his knowledge of the spies, Although the girl tries to pretend not to understand, Hojong reveals he has already taken care of all of them. Both he and his father did everything very diligently, but the hero knows there are still vultures who joined forces with a clan to devour his own. Even now, the girl continues to deny all the accusations. However, Hojong mocks her, saying that since she came, it's not hard to deduce she received an order to capture him. In that case, Anji starts to take the statement seriously, thinking the boy might have used himself as bait. But since he already plans to take them all down, Hojong immediately draws his weapon and asks if they are his enemies. Once again, Anji can't hold back her laughter and then reveals they are indeed assassins and were ordered to gather information. Despite that, she wanted to be kind if possible, but since the hero already knows everything, there's no need to keep pretending. Without further delay, the girl orders her subordinates to make the protagonist kneel. However, the moment the first one approaches to strike, the hero easily dodges and counterattacks, defeating the man with a single blow. Faced with this, Anji runs toward her colleague to help and using her powers, manages to soften his fall with a root touch ability, which prevents the man from getting hurt further and allows him to rest on the ground. Using this moment as an opportunity, the protagonist advances from behind to extinguish the campfire that provides vision for everyone. Then, unexpectedly for the leader, a smoke rises and the assassins start losing track of where they are on the battlefield, until Anji suffers a light cut on her face, making it necessary to activate her aura to react in some way. Even so, she doesn't know where the boy went, but a sense of danger is felt coming from the back of the forest. So the girl shouts for all of her subordinates to attack to the north, while the hero doesn't seem concerned at all. Especially since, at the moment they try to attack, all they manage to hit is the barrier surrounding Hojong, only to then be completely suppressed by the shield's counterattack effect. Faced with that, Anji finally begins to feel fear. But that is understandable because in front of her stands Hojong with a kind of divine giant spirit in the shape of a turtle. And to intimidate them even more, the hero warns that if they try to run, they'll lose their legs and therefore orders everyone to kneel now. Meanwhile, in another slightly more distant place, a secondary group of assassins is searching for something, and since nothing seems wrong there, they decide to head back. However, that would have worked if not for the presence of others in that location. Because they were trained, one of them noticed a strange presence, but it was already too late as most of the group had already been defeated, and no longer needing to hide, the beggars from the beggar sect appeared, surrounding the 3 remaining warriors. And among them, Duxing stated that it was exactly as the protagonist had said, unable to believe how perfectly he had predicted it. Honestly, at first, a successor of the beggars was a bit suspicious. After all, orthodox factions usually don't work together to bury another. It's the kind of thing unorthodox ones do. However, since the assassins recognized him instantly, it becomes clear that even the orthodox ones are doing bad things. And because of that, the leader orders the Mayan to throw away the title of the strongest together, as they don't deserve it. In the end, surrounded by the beggars, the assassins suffer the consequences of their actions. Back at the main battlefield, the protagonist defeats another one of his opponents. And at the moment when 2 of them advance from behind, they are also repelled with a spinning strike that sends their heads flying. Faced with that, the vice commander can't hold back his rage upon seeing his subordinates in that state. So Mayan charges forward saying he's going to tear the protagonist to pieces. However, the moment he gets close to the hero's axe, the 2 clash and Du immediately loses his strength until he crashes face first into a tree. After all, the upper part of her body was no longer in sync with the lower part, leaving Anji completely desperate. In any case, the girl manages to channel this fear into all the anger she's feeling. At the moment, they have lost 7 shadows, so she telepathically asks her partner to contact the 5 who went on patrol and have them return to the branch. As for herself, Anji warns that at the very least she will subdue the hero even if she has to use the secret arts. Therefore, trusting their leader, the 2 say their goodbyes, which surprises Hojong. Anji starts running into the forest where long weapons are at a disadvantage. This also excites the hero, impressed by the quick thinking of the assassin squad leader from the Mayan clan. A few hours later, the assassin approaches the place in the forest where he had been sent. However, upon arrival, he is greatly surprised to see all of his comrades tied to the trees. And the moment he tries to speak with one of his partners about who did this, the future leader of the beggars sect was already behind him, ready to finish off the last one. However, even after eliminating him, he states that they are the street cleaners. Then he orders a subordinate to tie him to a tree as well, along with the others. Duxing, on the other hand, believes they need more evidence than just these guys, because since the opponent is the Mayan clan, they can't act carelessly to avoid public retaliation. In any case, for now, he will think about it after the young master captures the last person. But just as he says this, a dark energy is felt by him, and understanding what that means, the beggar prepares himself and cuts through the path ahead. He uses the leaves as steps to move through the air with his technique of 10,000 wind bursts from the autumn village, in order to arrive as quickly as possible, because it seems the protagonist is not just planning to capture them. Back to the main battle, at the moment it was interrupted the previous night, Anji had hidden behind a tree, and as the protagonist approached, she trembled with fear because of Hojang's barrier. Even now, she didn't know if the boy was creating a monster within his body because she couldn't hurt him, and the girl believed this might be as strong as the martial arts of the main clan. However, she didn't have time to reflect further because once he discovered her location, the protagonist attacked without hesitation. Fortunately for her, the girl managed to dodge, leaving behind a completely crushed tree, and Hojang began boasting about his power. This made Anji also release hers, understanding that she could only win this way. And with just one hand movement, she swept part of the terrain beside the hero. She then stated that the protagonist had done nothing to be so happy. After all, he wasn't the only one hiding his true martial arts, which finally brought more seriousness to the duel. A few hours later, already at sunrise, the two continued fighting frenetically, and Anji was determined to win by using speed to her advantage. She dodged the protagonist's large area attacks and then landed precise blows on vital points. Furthermore, using her power that could move things at a distance, an aura in the shape of a ribbon, she restrained the protagonist and landed several even more powerful blows on all the most critical parts of his body. Once again, the protagonist was feeling on his own skin the power of that martial art that had shattered his clan's plaque with unprecedented ease, and had faced the elite swords of his clan with an unprotected body, demonstrating colossal strength. So after receiving another of those blows on his back, Hojang began to understand what his clan had gone through, and his condition was getting worse, even falling to his knees and spitting blood. Naturally, the girl became quite convinced that she would be able to capture the hero now. However, what the protagonist was thinking about was everything his father and younger brother had suffered. Therefore, while the girl advanced to try and intimidate Hojang more effectively, the boy was turning all that hatred in his heart into power. With unbelievable speed, the girl tried to attack, but even then she couldn't land a hit, being not only stopped by the hero but also slammed into the ground. Next, Hojang raised his axe to finish it off, but since the attacks couldn't get through the barrier, Anji boasted once again. After all, with the secret art of her clan, a regular axe attack wouldn't work. However, the truth was that, to her surprise, the protagonist had no intention of stopping, and so he decided to deal with it by using all his persistence until he could eventually break that defense. Until finally, the girl began to beg him to stop, but Hojang didn't stop because in the past, when it was their turn to beg, the Mayan didn't stop. Thus, the hero entered a frenzy to vent all his resentment on the girl. But it was at that moment that the future leader of the beggars appeared to interfere in the fight. After an explosion and a little while later, Duxing asked if the girl was still alive, and since her eyes were still open, Hojang confirmed that she was, despite being immobilized by the shock. However, since at least 5 or 6 of her ribs were crushed, Duxing didn't think the hero's attitude was very empathetic. Even so, he understood that they had tried to destroy his clan, but interrupting his thoughts, a servant shouted, asking when they were going to eat. Then the hare shouted even louder for him to shut up and call it doctor. Changing the subject, Duxing began to insist on the point that they needed evidence of what these people were plotting. Therefore, he criticized the hero's decision to simply go around eliminating everyone. In any case, Hojang asked if capturing an entire intelligence squad wasn't enough. But Duxing said it wasn't because even if they interrogated them, they would all pretend to be innocent. In the end, they needed more time to discover how far the Mayan clan had gone, since there was also a squad like that in Jiangsu. And it would take about a month to investigate, even with help from the leader of the Dragonhead Union. Even though it was the best option for now, Hojang thought they needed to act faster. So he asked which clan was harder to bring down, the Mayang or the Moyang, which was quite a difficult thing to consider, comparable to a tiger versus a lion. In the end, Duxing believed that because of their prestigious history, the Moyang would be a worse opponent, and Hojang agreed, because the Mayang's history already extended for 100 years of influence expansion that wasn't well regarded by the public. Moreover, at the moment, Hojang still hadn't made contact with Yua, who would be necessary if he wanted to fight against the 3 cults later. Therefore, taking down both clans now wouldn't be advantageous, but forming an alliance against a common enemy would be. So the hero suggested they pretend to have gone mad in order to try to befriend the lion. Sometime later in the Moyang clan's palace, a servant appeared to speak with the patriarch because a letter from the Beggars' Union had just arrived, which to Yanwo wasn't a surprise at all, since she had been the first to suspect it. In any case, Gun focused on understanding the message until, during the reading, he couldn't contain the strong emotions that stirred his aura, to the point of breaking pieces of the table, which made Yeonwoo curious to understand what the hell was written in the letter. After finishing reading, the father immediately handed the letter to his daughter as well, because a brat named Yeon Hojang had sent it. However, now Gun was more than anything impressed with the patriarch of the Yan clan for managing to raise such an interesting son. And inside the letter, the girl was also surprised because the content was simply an invitation to Hinan and for an alliance with the goal of destroying the Mayan clan. In the letter, the hero thanked Gun for warning that he would destroy his clan, as well as for the gift from the Mayan clan's intelligence organization, which had relieved his stress. In any case, Hojong said he would share what he was thinking. But first, he asked if what the patriarch was really after was to become the leader of the Mirim alliance, and inevitably, not only destroy his clan but also their current ally, the Mayan. By luck or foresight, the boy had hit squarely on Gun's life goal and deepest dream. Continuing the letter, the hero said he was impressed by Gun's ambition because he was also someone who didn't hesitate to achieve his goals. So getting straight to the point, Hojong said he would attack the Mayan, and knowing that Gun also had a secret plan to end them, he suggested they bury the clan together, but first meet to inspire one another even without trust. Lastly, Hojong said that the longer it took, the greater the loss would be, and affirmed that until the patriarch made his decision, he would be acting. Faced with that, the daughter asked if it could be a trap, but Gun didn't think so. It seemed the writing reflected the personality of the one who wrote it, and the Moyan chief didn't believe Hojong was superficial. That meant he was confident in his abilities to the point of not caring even if the proposal were rejected. Returning to the message, the patriarch finds it incredible how the hero transitions between respect and criticism, being the first time he's been so impressed. And somehow, he doesn't know how a plan to destroy the Mayan clan can be so exciting. Without further sharing his opinions, he asks what his daughter thinks, and Yanhwa simply advises Gun to follow his heart, which is in Hinnom. So thinking about it, the patriarch stands up, deciding that Hinnom might be the perfect distance for a trip. Heading to that same city where the protagonist is, he walks alongside the hair of the beggars, who can't see a street vendor without buying some food. But even if he's odd, he's generous with tips, to the vendor's relief. Dukseng, on his part, asks if it's really okay for them to just be walking around and buying things. Since the Mayan clan is powerful, they'll definitely send specialists, unlike those weak assassins from last time. Hojong provoked the lion named Moyan Gun, so the beggar is worried about what will happen when he arrives. But apparently he's the only one worried there, since the hero follows the philosophy that worrying doesn't solve anything. In any case, the beggar asks if he'll be able to handle it, since his martial arts are still in a developmental stage. Then in response, the hero comments that it's perfect, because the more opportunities he has to interact with masters, the more his martial arts will progress. And at the moment, Hojong needs to begin preparing for the awakening of the next guardian god. Still, Dukseng doesn't fully trust in his abilities and doesn't understand how the boy can be so determined on his own. However, even physically alone, Jipyeong remains in Hojong's mind, as well as his father, who offered to face the world for him. During his time as the Dark Emperor, the hero had companions, but nothing compared to the family he has now. Therefore, Hojong states that he is not alone, but only mentions Dukseng as his companion, although he also says it's just a business relationship. In any case, the beggar doesn't take it seriously and changes the subject, asking for a better meal after they take care of the next assassins, especially because there are already 6 of them nearby, and according to Dukseng, more will appear soon. So the two disperse into the crowd to divide attention, and to avoid blocking the public's way, the hero walks into a forest, where he chooses a rock to sit on and enjoy the rice ball he bought. However, even before that, sensing the presences, he asks them to wait until he finishes eating, leaving a warning with a projectile as he launches among the bamboo near the area where the assassins are hiding. However, the hero understands that he really won't be able to eat in peace, especially since this only made them all stop hiding. Among them, one asked if he was speaking to the eldest son of the Yun clan of Green Mountain. And since Hojong didn't hide who he was, the man got excited, saying he was in the right place. Surrounded by assassins from the Mayan clan, the hero still shows no concern. Thus, the man says he's impressed because even after a life dedicated to swordsmanship, the boy is the first person he's seen with such skill. And he introduces himself as a member of the Pure White Army, named Mayan Chai-san. In response, the hero asks if he's from the same group of fools from last time, so Chai-san questions whether that brat even introduced the unit's name. But Hojong says it doesn't matter because he just cut them all down with his axe as if strolling through the park. If they're from the same family, everyone who was coming practically lost control. Except for Chai-san, who, unlike his soldiers consumed by hatred, apologizes for sending an inexperienced niece to deal with him. Then, out of respect for that behavior, the hero stops mocking, saying it was a good fight. With this provocation, he expected the man to lose his composure and charge without hesitation, but that wasn't the case. First of all, Chai-san asks whether Anji happened to use any secret technique. Then the hero confirms, which surprises the warrior since the boy won even under those conditions. In any case, Chai-san states that he does not rely on secret techniques, and even if the patriarch believes in them, a warrior's martial arts are something that can't be defined by such things. As for his strength and ki, Chai-san makes it clear that it has nothing to do with his lineage or techniques because it was all earned through training. However, since the protagonist has seen the clan's secret technique, the warrior asks Hojong to be understanding because he will have to be eliminated. And so Hojong also prepares his combat stance, praising Chai-san for being the strongest person he has encountered. Then he also hopes the warrior understands that he will be used as a tool for his growth. In this case, with nothing left to say, Chai-san asks to begin right away. and he charges at a speed never seen before, striking the hero's axe, which he barely manages to hold against the impact. At that moment, from behind the two, an assassin fires an arrow to help the leader win. However, the hero doesn't even need to do much, because the one who cuts the arrow in half is the leader himself, whose pride won't allow anyone to interfere. Back to the fight, the two exchange powerful blows and injure each other equally. At a certain moment, the hero tries to land a straight slash, but Chai-san ducks to counter with a spinning strike. And by managing to get close, he quickly follows up with a ham strike to increase the pressure of his sword, causing the protagonist to finally fall to the ground, feeling the blow. Without giving him time to rest, Chai-san charges once again, throwing Ho-jeong backward. However, the hero reacts by hooking the concave part of his axe around the back of the warrior's neck to pull him in while delivering a punch. Still, Chai-san manages to defend by bringing his knee forward and spinning his center of gravity, countering with a powerful kick, which once again sends the hero flying, causing more injuries to his body. However, Ho-jeong keeps advancing, not caring about his condition, especially because if this continues, he'll finally be able to use the ability that is beginning to awaken during the fight, the mighty white tiger. In the face of that relentless battle between two monsters, one of the clan's heirs orders the assassins to attack the hero. However, even if they are commanded to, Lord Chai-san himself said not to interfere. Because of this, understanding that he needs to explain the situation, the boy warns that the ki of that kid has been expanding rapidly since earlier. During his inhale and exhale sessions, Chai-san comments that the boy seems a bit short of breath, so he decides to wait until Ho-jeong feels more comfortable, but suddenly two assassins appear to give support. But the protagonist grabs the first one's arrow, and upon realizing it was him who ruined his rice ball, returns the projectile precisely. To avenge his comrade, another jumps over to finish off the hero. However, he's far too slow, as Ho-jeong manages to leap over him without even noticing and finish him off with extreme ease. Even so, another one of them tries to attack from behind, but like his two companions, his fate is to be equally defeated. Finally, the last one tries a long-range attack with a whip that has a blade at the tip, but the protagonist manages to block the thrusts, and more than that, walks along the rope to finish him off. However, the assassin was satisfied because even though defeated, he managed to land a hit, which made Ho-jeong realize he wasn't strong enough yet. Chai-san, for his part, seriously asks why Kanglim interfered, and shouts, saying the battlefield is his, even though he's a member of a collateral bloodline. Meanwhile, the protagonist takes the opportunity to overcome his weaknesses, and for his recovery technique, he tries to maximize the amount of ki inhaled, and circulate vital energy throughout his body to activate the white tiger. Back to the conversation between the two, Chai-san states that his nephew is obsessed with secret techniques, but Kanglim is tired of debating useless matters. In any case, Chai-san insists that he shouldn't rely solely on secret techniques. But just as he was about to continue his lecture, the warrior sensed danger approaching and had to push his nephew away. Even with little time to react, the warrior manages to cut the rock in half, but the hero uses that as an opportunity to launch a surprise attack. In response, Chai-san changes his sword stance to strike near the neck, so the hero grabs the blade to keep it from cutting his arm in a contest of strength between the two. However, that was exactly what Kanglim wanted, to move in with the rest of the assassins, who instantly surround the boy to finish him off. Until, at the most critical moment, the protagonist's breath and gaze transform. And even though Chai-san is fast to warn his allies, in an instant the image of the white tiger appears, sending them all flying, as well as the forest, which is struck by a windstorm resembling a powerful tornado. Thus, in another place, even though far away, the conversation between two people is interrupted by what sounded like a tiger's roar. However, since it was only for a moment, they didn't give it much importance and decided to go out to eat. Back in the forest, those who were near the roar couldn't even maintain their consciousness, and even though he wasn't in the same condition as his subordinate, Chai-san had his eardrum burst. Besides that, he was finally seeing what real martial arts looked like. The sensation of the wind blowing against Ho-jeong's body made him feel quite nostalgic, because he was finally controlling once again the guardian god of the western sky and ruler of the wind, known as the White Tiger. Kanglim, on the other hand, was shocked by the protagonist's monstrous martial art, which was different from Chai-san, who did not give up and picked up his sword from the ground to keep advancing. However, his speed was no longer as impressive as it had been at the beginning of the fight, so with a simple attack, Chai-san was sent flying with his sword shattered in half. Without time to breathe, once again the warrior had to look for Ho-jeong, who had disappeared at high speed, until in a moment he reappeared, about to use the domain of the white tiger. So understanding that hesitating now would mean his death, Chai-san thought quickly, grabbing another sword from the ground and using the Eastern Sky technique. But the hero's speed was colossal, to the point of passing through the last surviving assassins and eliminating them before they even realized, to finally use an even more powerful blow against their leader, which was the 9 slashes of the white tiger's gale. The impact of the blow generated an even stronger wind than the last one, and as it approached, Kanglim shouted that they needed to dodge, which Chai-san already knew very well. However, the protagonist focused his attention on the squad leader, so he had to use all of his strength to counter the attacks and keep up with the hero. But at a certain moment, the protagonist's blade struck again, and this time it managed to cut the last sword in half. Even now, Chai-sen kept giving his all and used his last chance to unleash the ability, Thousand Observations of the Gods, but the attack was instantly thwarted, because Hojong used an even stronger ability, the embodiment of the White Tiger's Paw, which, when commanded to descend along with the hero's blade, the attack, infused with the protagonist's resentment, managed to strike the target and the entire surrounding area. At that moment, only Kanglim remained standing, but he quickly realized the state his uncle was in contrast to Hojong's, who didn't have any serious injuries. In the end, as he withdrew his axe, the hero thought that Chai-sen truly was a strong opponent, and that could be said just by looking at the balance of his swordsmanship, which greatly reminded him of his father. Therefore, Hojong made a point of saying that he was a much better individual than Kanglim, even though he was from the collateral bloodline. And now, with nothing more to say, our heroes simply asked the boy to become a messenger for his father. Sometime later, the boy returned to his clan with injuries far beyond normal. Then the patriarch asked how this had happened to his son, but all the doctor could say was that the crisis had passed despite the state of shock. Unfortunately, it could take 3 months for a full recovery, but the clan leader didn't want to hear that. With his son in his arms, Chun asked if this had been done by the manipulative master. However, summoning all of his strength, Kanglim cited the ancient teachings of the tiger, which the patriarch immediately understood, but he was furious at the thought that a brat like that could be worthy of the title of master. Changing the subject, Chun shouted, asking where Chai-san was to have allowed something like this. But he was informed of his death by the advisor, along with the warriors who accompanied him and the assassins, which meant that Hojong possessed martial arts skills that surpassed even those of Chai-san. Even among the collateral bloodlines, the warrior was one of the top 10 talents of the clan. So, with no other options, the patriarch ordered the release of the Blue Wolves. Before that, the advisor asked if he really should, but since Kanglim returned in that condition, Chan no longer cared about their reputation. Besides, at the moment they didn't even know if Anji, the advisor's daughter, was okay. In any case, the patriarch asked his servant to simply observe, ensuring that releasing the rabid wolves was the best method to catch an enraged tiger. So the advisor followed the patriarch's orders, going to the place where the wolves were sealed to unlock them, and order their interference with the prey that had been bothering the Mayan clan. The next morning, our hero continued his daily training as usual, and while meditating he has to sustain his center, maintaining balance with the turtle in order to then release the rest of the dark energies using the breathing technique, and finally restore his ki by using the white tiger for that. The white tiger is fierce and violent, so if the ligaments of his muscles aren't strong enough, he won't be able to control it. This is the reason it was worth training so much in the practice fields. In any case, now the hero feels that he is fully refined to match his body, and to test that, he uses the white tiger stance to charge at a tree and cut it into pieces using the tiger's domain. Thus, the boy manages to create immense cracks in the ground, but he still believes it's not enough. So while still there, Hojong unleashes all his power, deciding to push himself to the limit. And now, with everything ready, he was about to use the truth of the white tiger, until his stomach started growling, making his priorities shift. Since he hadn't eaten in a while, Hojong returned to that restaurant, and now he was finally starting to feel alive. Until suddenly a person appeared to toast with him, asking if she could join the table since she was also alone. And even before an answer, she sat down, asking if he wasn't from around there because she really liked foreigners. In a very friendly way, and the girl suggests they visit some charming places in the city, especially since she doesn't mind showing them to the warrior herself. Hojong in turn says she can sit, but the girl chooses the protagonist's lap as her seat. Wasting no time, she compliments the boy's face, asking where he's been all this time. Then the hero comments that he's been in the mountains for about 8 days, which makes her laugh because he didn't understand the question. In any case, the girl introduces herself as Nagbo and asks the hero's name, which he answers without hesitation, despite her flattery and calling him young master. Changing the subject, she asks about the axe beside him, which draws quite a bit of attention. And, as usual, questions how someone so slim can carry something so big. However, that was enough for the hero to ask her to stop, because even a butcher smelled less of blood than she did. In the end, it wasn't hard for him to make the connection between the girl and the cursed Mayan clan. So dropping the friendly expression, the girl asks if it was too obvious. Realizing her mistake, she thinks she shouldn't have said that last part since it's something everyone falls for. However, the hero suggested that since she got so close to his nose, she should put poison on the sleeve of her clothing. And even though it was a good idea, he didn't mind sharing it because they would all be eliminated by his hands anyway. Regarding that, the girl still doesn't seem very scared because apparently, Hojong doesn't know them. But even so, she also thinks it's understandable that they're unknown, since everyone who has seen them hasn't made it out alive. To illustrate, there once was a famous sword master called Haiyangsen, and to capture him, only 5 members of the Blue Wolf were needed. In the end, despite being hailed as a rare martial artist, he wasn't much at all. So Hojong actually thinks about that, since the man should have been on the same level as the 7 great sects, and asks how many came this time. To which, with a smile on her face, the girl replies that all of them came, since the master's attention had been drawn. Therefore, Natbo tells the hero to keep his expectations high, because when all 70 members of the sect are present, not even the 13 seats of the divine sky can win. which of course is questioned by Hojong. For the boy, with the 10 divine emperors and the 3 lords, the 13 seats would destroy the squad even if there were 700 of them. Besides, Hojong believes that his father alone could already defeat them, so Nakbo takes the opportunity to laugh a lot, saying she's really enjoying this since it's been a long time since they've been underestimated. In any case, the girl warns that usually, overly confident like him end up dying young, but Hojong just tells her to leave. Then, in an instant, she obeys, taking with her all the witnesses from the place and leaving the hero behind quite pensive. Suddenly, the protagonist senses a familiar presence because apparently, the patriarch of the Moyang clan has just arrived along with his daughter. In the past, the relationship between the two was both comrade and enemy for having taken down the leader of the Lust sect together. So the boy wonders what he should say first, but right after taking a sip of tea, he finds the perfect message in his mind. Heading to the port at the end of the day, Yamwu informs about a spy report that just arrived. Then the patriarch becomes quite disappointed upon reading it, because apparently he came there for nothing, as Chun has already ordered the capture of Hojong by releasing the Blue Wolf squad. To Yamwu, this is something terrifying because they are known as the worst group around, and to capture their targets they don't hesitate to burn an entire village. Therefore, in both their views, this is not something a young man who is just starting to rise in Mirim can handle. Suddenly, a beggar appears asking the Lord for a coin, and Gun of course does not refuse to help. However, that was just an excuse to deliver a message that young Master Yeon had requested a meeting the following day. And the message he left was that he would clean up this place before they met, which made Gun burst into laughter like never before. Because in the end, this really was a place where either you clean things up or things clean you up. The next morning, in an inn where the protagonist is staying, he wakes up peacefully and opens the window because it's already morning. Then, wasting no time, the boy opens a compartment he had hidden, revealing several of his tools for combat. And right after picking up one of them, the boy infuses his aura into it and throws it out the window, hitting a man on the street. Upon falling to the ground, he startles all the other disguised citizens nearby. So without even trying to hide, the hero shows himself at the window to begin cleaning up that squad. A few meters away, a vendor tries to earn his daily bread. Then a colleague shouts, asking if Zhang isn't selling too cheaply, but the bald man comments that it's also cheap for fishing. That's why he keeps trying to sell that enormous carp, which is almost the size of a child. But at the moment he was about to say the price, one of the hero's tools also hit him, revealing a sword hidden inside the fish. And it also struck the vendor's friend, who had a weapon hidden in his sleeve. Faced with that, innocent people began to appear, asking what was going on. And since there were more imposters than Hojong thought, he felt he needed to speed things up. Wasting no time, he throws 2 more of his knives, one of which hits a fruit vendor, and the other hits a companion beside him, who barely managed to wield a spear to counterattack. Naturally, the protagonist goes through the city clearing out all members of the squad, until just when he thinks he's finished, he realizes there's still a place with a very strong killing intent. And so he heads straight there, and with the domain of the White Tiger, he bursts forth at an even greater speed, which allows him to move through the air even with the heavy axe in his hands. And being used to striking first, Hojong tries to finish off his opponent before he can even react. However, as he gets closer, an apparently dangerous arrow approaches and nearly hits the hero if not for the handle of the axe. At the same moment, Hojong responds to that arrow with a kick that redirects it toward the person who fired it. Then, with another burst of extreme speed, the protagonist dodges many other arrows, passing through various buildings while trying to find the one responsible. Without thinking much, Hojong tries to destroy the place with a punch full of aura, marking the first point. And by dodging other arrows, he marks the second. Then, after jumping over a rock, he marks the 4th through the 9th with his precise punches. Then in the end, the hero climbs up that same rock to mark the 10th point, and after finishing his work, he finally manages to gather all the cursed members of the Blue Wolf he needs to eliminate in one place. Among them, Nakbo, who seems to be the leader, asks who the hell the protagonist is, so Hojong reminds her they were introduced the day before. However, she doesn't believe that this is the ability of an inexperienced novice in the world. But to our hero, that doesn't matter, so he just tells them to come to him already because he needs to finish before sunrise. In that case, already feeling disrespected enough, Nakbo yells for the poison to be released, and in an instant, a wave of destruction rises up the rock. The assassins in turn quickly place cloths over their noses and start boasting, saying the poisonous smoke will soon fill the hero's lungs. Furthermore, even if he manages to escape that, he will face them, who are ready to attack. Then, more excited than ever, Nakbo yells that the hunt for the hunters has finally begun. However, what she didn't expect was that instead of fleeing, the protagonist would dissipate that poisonous smoke and counterattack by sending it right back to where the members of the Blue Wolf squad were, making them tremble in pain even while wearing masks that filter the poison. Faced with that, Nakbo still doesn't understand this gust of wind because it's as if the boy had created it. But she didn't have to think much because the answer appeared right in front of her with the image of the White Tiger. And not wanting to drag out the confrontation any longer, the hero ordered them all to disappear like the trash they were. So Hojong crossed the top of the rock with his axe, creating a slash that extended to the base of his enemies, causing a landslide. Nagpo, in turn, resisted by running at full speed, and meanwhile, she thought that the reason for the destruction of the rocks might be to use the technique of void penetration. But the moment she realized it, it was already too late. That night, in an inn in the city of Hinnom, a servant of Patriarch Gun asked if he wanted to go to bed now. And since his daughter seemed to suggest the same, the candles were extinguished. But before he could sleep, a strange energy blew out the candle, carrying the scent of blood. And at the end of that scent stood our protagonist, right in front of Gun, who even in the rain had shown up to fulfill his word that he would be there after the cleanup. Therefore, Gun understands what he's seen and uses electricity to relight the candle. Honestly, he thought the protagonist would never come, but now standing before him and his daughter was the heir of the Yun clan. Without further delay, Hojang asks permission to store his axe, and everyone introduces themselves in the shortest way possible. Already at a table, Gun says the boy is late, but asks if the delay was due to eliminating the entire Blue Wolf squad, to which the hero replies no, making him quite surprised. Because of that, the Patriarch asks if all that arrogance from the boy was just empty talk, and tries to give him a moral lesson, saying that there are times not to cling to pride. But the hero interrupts, saying that 61 were buried or cut down to the end of their lives, and 6 were shattered in such a way that they couldn't be found. Then he selected 2 of the most important people to send back in pieces to the Mayan clan. Hearing that, Gun can hardly believe that in just half a day the entire squad was eliminated. So Hojang gets excited, saying that Patriarch Chun's face when he receives the news will be amazing. The Patriarch of the Moyan clan, named Moyan Gun, in the past had many moments with the protagonist, and now that he sees the one who took his life, the boy doesn't feel well about Gun's peculiar judgment. However, thanks to dying once and managing to come back to life, even though Gun doesn't recognize him, Hojang knows him very well. Changing the subject, the Patriarch scolds the protagonist's action, because the Blue Wolf squad was a faction feared even by them, so how could the boy annihilate all of them and still send 2 as examples? Now it's clear that the entire clan will act, no longer wishing to keep things quiet. Clearly, that should be enough to settle the score, so Hojang asks if they should back off. But the Patriarch declines, replying that he enjoyed the trip very much, so he decides to simply pretend they never met. Still, Gun remains the same cunning man the protagonist remembers, as he's clearly trying to calculate the best option. Wasting no time, Hojang brings up the Murim Lord, since that must be the dream and life ambition of every Patriarch. In fact, Gun considers this a good topic, because he was surprised when the letter was sent. In that case, he asks how the boy knew, and more than that, how he could be so sure of his ambition. Then with a smile, the hero simply replies that it was very easy. After all, having the greatest clan under heaven and becoming the leader of the Murim Alliance is something every man dedicated to martial arts dreams of, especially if he's the patriarch of one of the 7 great clans, and Yanhua is quite impressed by how cleverly he answered that question. However, thinking further for a moment, all that expression of anger and melancholy on the boy's face seems to her like an inexplicable emotion, especially because it resembles someone who is once again facing an old and unhappy destiny. Getting straight to the main point, she comments that if the Patriarch decides to end the trip like this, he'll have to use the other option, fighting this battle alone. Obviously, Gun can only laugh at the young man's idea, but Hojang adds that he will attack his clan as well. A suggestion like that brings a hostile atmosphere, but the hero makes it clear that he is not alone in this. Alongside him is the sect of beggars, and Gun will have to deal with the rumors that the Patriarch planted spies within the great clans to annihilate them. In the end, the hero knows there's a possibility of losing, but if the Patriarch acts that way, he will have to give up on his dreams because the sects will keep an eye on the Moyan. Therefore, the price of going against his plan is the end of the Patriarch's dream, so the hero asks what Gun's decision will be, whether he will form an alliance or choose to be hostile with him instead. For some reason, this intimidation stirs the Patriarch's spirits to the point of shouting with joy at losing. Then he praises the boy's intuition, saying it is unbelievable, while Yanhua thinks it's the first time she has seen her father laugh like that. Either way, Gun calls for a toast to the destruction of the noble family, and Hojang accepts immediately, turning all that hostility into an alliance. While enjoying a meal, Gun asks if they should attract the Shulin sect, and Yanhua comments that it's a good idea since they are in Hinnom, just like the Mayang, and with their prestige, the Mayang clan will be cautious. Even so, in the Patriarch's view, he believes they should add one more thing, that being the right to summon the assembly and call for a temporary martial alliance. Naturally, the protagonist asks if Gun understands what that means. However, the Patriarch knew very well his goal was to declare the Mayan clan a public enemy, isolate and then annihilate them. Even though surprised, the protagonist understands the Patriarch's decisive move, so Gun comments that it's easy to talk with a smart person. In that case, the hero suggests that spies were not only planted in his clan, but also in the Mayan clan, which, although only a hunch at first, turned out to be true, though Yanhua still seems suspicious. Anyway, the hero gets up saying he's going to leave, and understanding that he must have been through a lot fighting, Gun lets him go. However, just before the farewell, the Patriarch asks the hero not to die on the way. After all, if that happens, this meeting will have just been a stroll like any other. In response, the hero says not to worry, claiming that even if he were struck by the Dang clan's needles, he would survive. And Gun found it very funny that he chose that example out of all the possible ones. However, Hojong wasn't joking at all like the patriarch, because in their next encounter, it would be his turn. After the protagonist leaves, the patriarch continues thinking about the hero's intimidation regarding his dream. Then he asks his daughter what she thinks of this man named Hojong, and at first, she criticizes his arrogance. Anyway, and that's what she felt when she first saw him, but Yamwood doesn't believe the Mayan clan will be defeated with courage alone. To her, the boy is just a youth trying to borrow his father's power, and the father laughs at such harsh criticism of the man who would be her husband. But even the patriarch agrees that he wouldn't be a good partner for her. After all, if that boy inherits his surname, Gun would make him the successor immediately, which naturally infuriates the daughter for not being the first in mind. Despite being in front of his daughter, the father doesn't hold back in saying that Hojong is the one he desires. So since there's no way to make him join the Moyan clan, the girl asks if it's better to get rid of him soon. And even after praising him so much, Gun doesn't mind answering that Hojong is already next in line after the Mayan clan. Shortly after, the protagonist heads to a forest where he begins to feel the fatigue of the day. Thus, he leans on something thinking he should have drunk some cups of water instead of alcohol. The fight with the Blue Wolf squad was certainly exhausting, but the conversation with Gun was even more so. Anyway, the protagonist sits beside a rock to catch his breath a little, and then returns to his training as he does every day religiously, ever since he awakened the giant turtle during the battle against Mabang. Our hero confirmed through the meeting of successors that the Mayan clan was responsible. Then a battle occurred against the assassins, and the protagonist also fought to the death against that man named Chai San, which, if it weren't for him, Hojong wouldn't have managed to awaken the White Tiger either, let alone encounter the enemy of a past life and manage to join forces with him. Faced with all this, the hero comments that the end of the disaster is near, but that he's a bit exhausted. However, at that moment, someone asks how someone who claims to be exhausted managed to climb up there. It is the heir of the beggars who asks if the hero missed him. Instead of greeting him, Hojong asks if the boy lost sight of the assassins to be there. But for making his colleague angry, he comments that he was just joking. Anyway, Dokseng notices that the protagonist seems quite injured, so he asks him to look around because Gun said that if the young master was struggling alone, he could count on the blue squad. Obviously, this was a surprise for the hero, but everyone was very determined to act alongside Hojong. Thus, while thinking about it, the protagonist asks to speak with Shimo. After all, he knows that everyone must have been through a lot to come there today, and that is something that makes Hojong very happy. Either way, it will be difficult from here on, but Shinmo believes they will be fine as long as they are under the command of the first master. Back at Patriarch Chun's residence, the news arrives in the worst possible way. While Chun cannot believe it, the advisor has to listen to all the complaints, because the fury of the Mayan clan chief upon discovering the extermination of the Blue Wolf squad right after his partner Chai San becomes terrible. Moreover, in the end, even all these efforts were not enough to capture Hojong. With 2 henchmen sent as a warning lying on the ground, the advisor states that he has not given up yet. He also says he is considering sending the Blue Wolf squad again. Faced with this, the Patriarch becomes even more irritated since they are no longer alive, but the aide suggests using the corpses, as the remaining members of the Blue Wolf squad that Hojong did not exterminate are still in the streets disguised as civilians. If they proceed this way, the protagonist may be seen as an evil enemy who massacred innocents throughout Henan. The advisor also investigated major unresolved crimes in Jiangsu province and instructed people to spread rumors that Hojong was the culprit. Because of that, the Shaolin will not remain idle, and with an enraged public, the orthodox martial arts world will unite against the boy. In this case, Chum calls Wu Sen for a moment to drink, and after serving a cup, he praises the behavior he is showing as being worthy of a good commander. Thus, the Patriarch decides to proceed this way and this time to send people who can capture the boy. Like the 3 half-brothers of Mayan Chai-san, who were supposed to be used as the vanguard in the attack on the Yun clan. However, since that brat is part of the Yun clan, the advisor understands the message to send them right away. This time, even being the Patriarch of the Yun clan, Chief Mayan believes it will be useless against them since the 3 have mastered the secret techniques of their ancestors. Later in the city, an expert begins recording the casualties, and an aide informs that there are 11 bodies in total. In this case, the investigator is confused to know whether this is really all the work of the Yan clan's eldest son. While the man does his work, locals comment that this is Li Chil-kyun, a Shaolin disciple leading the Diamond Fist, and that the reason for the interference probably means that not even they could just keep watching. 5 years ago, the fire incident in Jiangsu, and 3 years ago, the murder of the courtesan, in addition to the mass crime involving the Hamin family. All of this gives Hojong a huge criminal record, but Chil-kyun finds it strange that a boy under 20 could have done so much. Then at that moment, the town's doctor appears, and to the Mayan's misfortune, he explains that he would recognize the face of the victim if it were someone from there. But this person is clearly not the fish seller Qian, but someone else wearing the vendor's clothes. In this case, the Shaolin disciple tries to understand who the victims are if not locals. until suddenly a subordinate comes running, calling for his master, and upon stopping, comments that he must see it for himself. Sometime later, the two arrive at the place where the final battle against the Blue Wolf took place, and there, naturally, the evidence of the confrontation that occurred the night before still remains. While one vomits from the smell, the other asks for everything to be cleaned before sunset. So far, there are dozens of warriors either slashed by heavy iron or crushed. Then the investigator wonders if this was also Hojan's doing. However, he tries to understand if the boy fought everything alone because it would require a frightening level of martial arts. Until once again, the subordinate appears to report something, but now it is said that Hojang is at the gate that leads to Hyochang. In this case, Hyochang, not intending to let the protagonist escape, activates his aura, and using the floating diamond movement technique, he runs to see with his own eyes what kind of person Hojang is. Shortly after, our hero walks through the city with the flag of his clan along with all his soldiers. Then the people who are already manipulated begin to feel fear and try to tell him to leave. However, as he walks past them, some begin to think that he doesn't look like a villain. In any case, even if the civilians can apply pressure at this moment, a city guard appears. And for all the crimes he is suspected of, he orders the boy to surrender immediately. But unexpectedly, the protagonist simply jumps onto the leader of the Blue Hall of the Mayan clan and creates a massive explosion with an attack, leaving behind the determined expression of his soldiers and a defeated enemy on the ground. Faced with this, the other soldiers are determined to avenge their leader, but in an instant, the protagonist takes down everyone who opened their mouths. And so, with others still remaining, the hero asks that this time his soldiers take the initiative to eliminate the opponents, which they do without hesitation, easily defeating the warriors and showing how superior they are. And in this way, the protagonist continues walking slowly as the path is cleared. In the end, the flag remains raised, unlike the soldiers who were exterminated. Then, for the first time, the population realized how terrifying Hojang could be if he played the role of the villain. Later, a wanted poster of the protagonist reaches the beggars, listing numerous crimes. It says he caused a fire, among several other unbelievable accusations being spread throughout Hinnom. Then the hero comments that they prefer to send troops without hesitation by portraying him as a villain, hoping that pressure will fall on him. However, Hojang responds by calling his squad leader and asking him to send 10 agile individuals as well as to prepare the remaining personnel to be ready within 2 days. Faced with this, Duxing asks what the boy is doing and to explain how they got to this point. Hojang states that he will have to go see the patriarch of the Mayan clan personally. In a natural reaction, the heir of the beggars believes it to be a trap, but the hero simply asks Duxing to keep gathering information. In every way, the beggar tries to stop Hojang, but his decision is already made. And that makes our hero leave without even looking back, which leaves Duxing angrier than ever. Anyway, even being confident like that, the hero understands that it might really be too soon to advance against the Mayan clan. So far, the turtle's ki has already increased by 2 stages, reaching about 80% completion. And the Hayami breathing technique has purified most of the impurities in his body, with the white tiger filling it with natural ki. Thanks to that, the flow of the white tiger's ki, which was like a current before, became wide like a river, so Hojang is at his strongest. However, if there are 3 experts on Mayan Chaisan's level to face, the hero still doesn't know if it will be enough. Naturally, the boy understands that it will be a bit challenging, and if he could at least awaken the Crimson Bird or the Azure Dragon, things would be better. In the room of the Mayan clan patriarch, the commander announces that he is there, but the moment he opens the door, he almost burns from all that energy, because even inside his room, the patriarch is training to reach a new level. But what surprises Wusan the most is the fact that he has reached such a high level so quickly. And more than that, it is the Divine Phoenix technique martial art. Thus, proud of his new power, Chun asks what Commander Wusan thinks. Indeed, the ability seems sufficient to make even the heavens kneel. And this becomes even clearer when Chun releases more of his power to demonstrate. Then he also controls all of it to return to normal and be able to talk. While getting dressed, the patriarch comments that he knows the first priority is to destroy the Yan clan. In fact, he also asks what the problem is and is informed that Gun has exercised the right to summon an assembly, so the temporary Murim alliance will come. In this case, Chun laughs a lot because he believes that since he spread Hojang as a villain, the Moyan clan plans to use that to destroy the Yan. Changing the subject, the patriarch asked what happened with the boy and was told that Wusan sent the Blue Hall as bait. So now both Hak and Ui and Hyun, along with the 300 from the White Dragon unit, can capture and bring the boy. Among them, the bald one is the one they call Mayan Hak, and while Hyun wears a headband, Hui carries his sword at his waist. Faced with this, the protagonist communicates with the squad leader Shimo. Apparently, the 3 are formidable masters, and Hojang confirms this by admitting that, in terms of martial arts, they are several levels above him. However, for some reason, this feeling seems familiar to the hero, as he is certain he has felt this aura before. And when he tries to search for the exact moment in his mind, he manages to remember those who invaded his clan and destroyed everything. Because of that, things change for our hero, and his power begins to leak uncontrollably. Shimo still doesn't understand what this is, But what goes through our hero's mind is clear to him. Since he returned, there hasn't been a single time he forgot that moment. The moment of meeting the enemies who wiped out his clan was near, and Hojong questioned whether he was afraid. But he also thought it could be such a great joy that it wouldn't let him stand still. Without further delay, the protagonist charges alone to face the masters who destroyed his clan. And rushing through the battlefield like a flash, he jumps over Hak, leaving both him and the other two confused. But Hojong could no longer hold back the longing he felt for his past emotions. Back at the Green Mountain Yun clan, the Patriarch is informed that the right to summon the Moyang Assembly has also reached the Patriarch there. Then the new advisor asks if he intends to go, but the chief immediately says no. Obviously, the general tries to understand the reason, but Yun only asks him to deliver this letter addressed to Chun as quickly as possible. Inside it is a message that scolds Chun for accusing his son for personal gain. And in case Hojong is put in danger, it is also a warning that they will pay the price. In this case, the advisor despairs even more at the possibility of them targeting the Lord, but he does not want to wait for the assembly. After all, at this moment, his son is fighting alone against the Moyang clan. So he asks if he can really be called a father if he cannot protect his son's life. And once again, he orders the advisor to send them immediately, which this time he understands. So now the Patriarch asks his son to hold on just a little longer. Back to our hero's confrontation, Hak raises his arm to defend himself and somehow manages to do so without issue. Still, just from the scratch on the arm that blocked the attack, the bald man is already impressed. Faced with this, Wei asks to be the next to fight, but Hidon warns that since they are talking about the master who mastered the divine turtle technique, this will end now. Then Hak is pleased by the praise, but without wasting time, the protagonist attacks again with more strength, trying to finish off the bald one by any means before he receives help. Because if he can't cut Hak, the hero believes he might be able to crush him if he persists with his strikes. Seeing this, the blue squad starts to run to help the young master, but the battle between the two creates such a windstorm that they can't even get close. Moreover, the impact of the strikes on the terrain becomes increasingly intense, and Hojong keeps going, trying to attack with his axe again. However, the bald man manages to grab the blade and counterattack with a kick that sends the protagonist flying. With the two more separated, Hak greets the protagonist upon realizing that he is Hojong due to his boldness. And then, since they've had some fun already, he asks the hero to surrender in silence. Now the protagonist is sure this is the guy because he can barely breathe from the familiarity of that unpleasant aura. Hak comments that Hojong's killing aura is quite intense and asks how many people he has exterminated. Furthermore, the bald man believes the hero is not someone who can be called a knight of justice, because despite disguising himself as a righteous person, he committed a cowardly act of invasion, massacring innocent civilians. And to Hak, that makes him a butcher who follows the darkest path of all. All those words spoken by that man make our hero tremble with rage because of the hypocrisy. And Hojong clearly shows what he's feeling in his eyes, which boil with energy. Then, while Hak tries to understand how Chai-san was defeated by the boy, our hero charges to attack him once again, but is knocked back at the last second. Also quite irritated, Hak asks if he won't even get a second to mourn the death of his relative. However, the protagonist can no longer stand listening to that nonsense and makes it clear that he will cut down the warrior for the glory of his clan. Back to the investigator, he finally arrives at the victims belonging to the Blue Hall of the Moyang clan. And noticing where Hojong went, he finds it strange since that is the path to the center. In this case, Shul-kyung doesn't think twice before setting off, and along the way he wonders why the boy would attempt a war against the Moyang clan. At that moment, Duxing appears at high speed until he manages to catch the investigator's attention. Then the man stops, not understanding how he was followed so easily, and taking the opportunity, the beggar introduces himself. Later, the two go to a restaurant, and Duxing asks what the Shaolin intends to do with Hojong. Then Cheol-kyung comments that he will have to arrest him because of all the chaos in the city. And not only him, other Shaolin won't stand by allowing more assassins to appear. So Duxing asks if the investigator knows what's happening and hit him right under his nose, if by any chance he knows the reason Hojong came there and caused this whole situation. Obviously, the beggar knows that Cheol-kyung has no idea, but that's not a problem because Duxing pours a drink to explain everything calmly. Back to our protagonist's fight, the bald man seems to be taking things more seriously as he strikes the ground hard, and uses that destabilization of the ground to approach the protagonist at high speed. However, the hero seems to adapt as he manages to use him as a foothold to land a full hit to the face. Hak in turn tries to retaliate, but the hero quickly pulls back. Soon the two clash again until their blows collide, creating a devastating gust of wind. While the protagonist appears to be exerting great effort, it seems effortless for the bald man. Hojong begins to feel unwell due to an innate power flowing into his weapon. Then Hak mocks him, asking if he thought his fist covered in divine spiritual energy would be weak. But at the last moment, Hojong intercepts the attack with the Bako martial domination. At the moment the bald man defends using the golden turtle armor, the hero continues with the 9 thunder strike of the Tiger King. Meanwhile, those who were supposed to be the protagonist's allies can only watch this clash between two equally powerful warriors. However, since the enemies are not alone if they join forces, Shimo realizes that the young master could be defeated. In that case, the commander believes the right thing to do is to break the seal with the divine dragon embrace technique passed down by the patriarchs, because that way he could at least take one of them to the afterlife. The others, meanwhile, praise the hero's ability to hold out against Hack for so long. And among them, Heon finds everything very strange because the kid's techniques seem familiar, because it certainly looked like something the head of the Mayong clan had done some time ago. One day, a fight was taking place in the mine where the workers were, and with a punch to a colleague's face, one of them shouted because of an insult he had heard, because what was being said was that the Kylan clan's divine technique was inferior to another's. The one who was hit stood up to fight, but the first was determined to prove he was right about being superior. Then it was at that moment that Woosan appeared using the Kylan blood claw to strike the aggressor, which frightened the boy. That was the Kylan divine technique of the chief, and they said that the Phoenix divine technique mastered by the Patriarch was number 1. However, those who made those comments also began to argue, each defending a different martial art. Then it was at that moment that Woosan intervened, saying that divine techniques should be used to bring down the Young clan instead of fighting among themselves, which due to his position naturally calmed the conflict between the two. However, that boy who got beaten had a mark that is the same seen on Wee's body today. Back to the fight, the allies warned Hack that if the sun sets, they would intervene. So a bit annoyed by that, the bald man apologizes, saying he'll have to deal with everything quickly. And since the hero is blocking the energy that's infiltrating his body through the weapon, it means he only has 30% of his strength, which makes the next strike the most decisive of all, so Hojong tries to provoke him. And it seems to work because Hack releases a greater extension of his power to show the divine spirit technique. Hack uses the spirit's light steps and the protagonist uses the immovable monstrous pillar technique. Therefore, at the moment the two begin to approach each other, it becomes clear that there is confusion because the techniques look very similar. In any case, Hack attacks with the fist of the divine spirit and the protagonist responds with the wall of the weight of 3 turtles. But once again, the clash of their attacks seems to cancel each other out due to how similar they are. In this case, for a moment, they stop fighting to try to understand the situation. And being the first to speak, the protagonist asks what kind of martial art Hack has learned, because it seems that standing before him is a user of a false black tortoise art. Mayong Onji was an opponent who, upon reflection, the hero realized possessed the same martial arts as his own. Her technique was known as the technique of the divine turtle spirit, so the hero criticizes himself for not realizing it earlier, because in the end, only the color of the two martial arts differs, but they share the same essence. Ayan was someone who mentioned this during the meeting when she spoke about the 4 directional martial lords. All she knew was that the masters who dominated both defense and offense held that title because they were also the ones who stopped the blood religion disaster. Meanwhile, the boy informed that the Mayong clan appeared after that as their ancestors supported the 4 lords. Therefore, it became clear that the 4 directional martial lords were descendants of the technique of the 4 divine beasts. And in this case, the ancestors of the Mayong family either inherited or stole the martial arts of those lords, which is quite a natural conclusion. And it also explains the existence of this foreign martial art before his eyes. Hack in turn says he doesn't understand any of this crazy talk about false techniques, and warns that he will kill the boy and then apologize to his ancestors, because for a moment he confused a random martial art with a sacred and historical divine technique. Without further delay, the bald man charges using the same technique as before, so the protagonist analyzes it. And since the immovable monstrous pillar is not a technique executed suddenly, he waits for the strike to reach him to frustrate it at the most decisive moment, sending Hack flying. For an instant, the protagonist's power begins to reveal itself in a greater way, until he manages to use the mighty defense of the true emperor and asks Hack to try again, mocking whether this is the true extent of the sacred power passed down by his ancestors, because if so, he says it's better left buried. At that moment, the protagonist lands the most effective insult to under of the bald man. Hack becomes furious at this disrespect, so his partners try to remind him that they need the boy alive. But he doesn't listen and uses the 18 consecutive fists of the turtle spirit to charge at the hero, who summons the same spirit. Thus, the two begin an unbelievable exchange of blows, and amid the defenses, Hojong comments that the black tortoise is the shadow of the north and of winter. Furthermore, it is the guardian of the end which controls water. Naturally, tributaries only flow into the main river because that is the law of water. So the force dissipated through variations will eventually return to the original spring. At least that is what the protagonist bases himself on during the fight. Amid the attacks, the bald man becomes excited upon noticing that the hero's defense is breaking. Then he lunges to take the boy's life, but that's exactly what Hojong wants. Because now, understanding how it works, the protagonist easily dodges the blow, leaving even Hack confused as to when his power became so weak. In any case, the hero places one of his hands on the warrior's head, because now everything he possesses from these false martial arts the protagonist as the Great Master will take back. While the true energy of the turtle spirit is being absorbed, Hack panics and tries to react but cannot pull his arm back, until at a certain moment his once strong and healthy body becomes thin and frail. But even now, his partners did not understand what was happening, and they only realized Hack's condition at the moment he dropped to his knees on the ground, having been released by the protagonist and defeated through a complete energy absorption. Therefore, now with great confidence, the hero makes it clear that he has already sent one to the afterlife. Trembling with rage at the state of their brother, both Hyun and Kui charge forward. But all the hero ever wanted was exactly to confront the villains of his past incarnation. That same night, within the walls of the Mayan clan, guards escort the patriarch, who is arriving by carriage. Already inside, Chun asks if everything has been prepared, and the answer is yes. 50 blood horses and 50 death swordsmen, along with 300 soldiers from the dragon army, are already ready. Before anything else, the advisor rushes to speak with Chun, as since Gun will soon call the meeting, the most prudent thing to do is to wait. However, the patriarch makes a point of reminding him of the letter they read in the afternoon, with a warning from Lord Yan. For Chun, that clan will soon become a public enemy in the martial arts world, subject to punishment. Therefore, for everything they've already been through, Chief Mayong wants to be the first to deal with it. And so, continuing the journey, the gates open for the head of the greatest family in the world to go in search of the young master, Hojang. Back to the confrontation, while fighting Hui, the protagonist realizes that the martial art is a copy of the Crimson Bird. However, Hyun uses the advantage of being 2 against 1 to apply pressure, and Hui wastes no time attacking from behind. Then the hero uses a wind ability to push the two as far away as possible. Hyun shouts to use the technique Phoenix's Flaming Hand, but the hero responds with the 12 walls of the northern sky, making all that fire in the boy's hand cool down, only to respond with the 9 Thunder Palms of the Tiger King. Faced with this, Hui tries to attack the hero while he's focused on his brother, but being unable to, he asks if Hyun is alright, though at the moment, it's necessary to live ahead. Hyun asks if Hui didn't see that Hack had his ki completely drained. And to explain that mystery, he suggests that the boy is a user of demonic arts. But all the protagonist does is laugh at that insinuation, because to him, those techniques were likely created by people like them. To explain, Hojang says that by having a good understanding of the martial arts and the 4 gods, it's impossible to even reach half the power. And besides, even if they don't believe it, the result is that both of their lifespans have already been cut in half. In the end, Hojang shows pity that they are slowly self-destructing with cheap imitations of the techniques he uses. This time, the warriors raise their guard to attack again, but showing a bit of fear. So taking advantage of that and the superiority he already has, the protagonist simply sends the warriors to visit Hack in the heavens, bringing this confrontation to its final stretch, because with those issues out of the way, Hojang orders his soldiers to call the chief of the Mayan clan. The next morning, the flag of the Yan clan of Green Mountain remains raised. Meanwhile, it's mentioned that today is the day of the great meeting, and apparently the enemies are standing still like turtles. Yang Hyun can hardly believe they were intimidated by the young master's strength and believes they won't even need to act. However, Shimo warns that the entire martial arts world is watching, so if they duel, it will become a war. In the end, the duty of the Blue Driving Squad is to protect the young master, and Hyun apologizes for being reckless. However, the boy's words also struck the commander, because Hojang alone was keeping those 300 at bay. Besides, he knew the enemy's weakness, so Shimo doesn't understand how that's possible. Anyway, at that moment, a person yelling that he's not just any beggar draws attention. And despite being very dirty today, the fact that they don't recognize him is quite outrageous. Luckily for Dukseng, at least Hojang appears, so the beggar warns that things are terrible. Before the boy can even explain, the protagonist starts joking about what the topic will be. But Dukseng quickly starts to speak, since it's something very serious. By then, it was already strange to everyone what was happening, because the soldiers had pulled back. Then Dukseng finally managed to inform that Lord Yan had already intervened. Not long ago, he sent a letter threatening the patriarch of the Mayan clan, and the reason was very clear. It was because he tried to protect his son. Little by little, the hero organizes the information about his father's declaration of war and the withdrawal of the dragon army, until he realizes that he no longer has a reason to stay there instead of running to the main camp. At this moment, the natural reaction will be for the entire Mayan clan to attack Green Mountain. And remembering everything that happened in his past, Hojang trembles with rage. Then he quickly mounts his course with determination, this time to protect the people he loves. Later, despite the sudden call for this great meeting, Gun thanks all the leaders for their presence. And given the urgency of this very important matter, they decide to get straight to the point. Because today, for the future of Murim, the patriarch will propose that a group be designated as a public enemy. The head of the Nambone clan then begins to wonder whether it will be the Mayan clan or perhaps the Yan clan of the Green Mountain. However, even with 2 clear options, it is still impossible to know what Gun is thinking. At this moment, the leader of the Sholin sect, known as the Great Master Gonggong, comments that the matter is indeed serious. And precisely because it is serious, he remarks that Gun certainly understands what it means. This declaration signifies complete exclusion from the martial arts world of the orthodox path, like a banishment, equivalent to the annihilation of an individual or force which the patriarch is aware of. In this case, the leader of the Wudang clan, called Samyan Jinin, asks who would be responsible for such a serious crime. Then Namgon comments that apparently there was a general uproar in Hinam. Peng Mugang, in turn, who is the patriarch of the Hebei Pang clan, seems unaware of it. Venom warns that the first young master of the Yan clan has been causing problems there. And that's not all, because he also heard rumors that he is suspected of crimes in Jiang's province. In this case, it is asked whether he is the public enemy, and it replies not necessarily, but where there's smoke, there's fire. After all, they say it's easier to know what's at the bottom of the sea than what's going on in a man's mind. On the other hand, one of the leaders comments that it's an unfounded rumor, so he becomes curious about the reason, since the one saying this is the patriarch of the Zhuge clan, named Zhuge Manhwa. All those crimes supposedly committed by Yan are unresolved, and to Manhwa, it's strange that after years, they all fall on the hero. Recalling that Yan once saved his daughter, the patriarch comments that this is not something villains do. Therefore, he believes it must be a false rumor meant to tarnish the boy's reputation. In that case, and comments that Manhwa should take a good look at his daughter, because these associations affect marriage, but the colleague affirms that Ayan has a good eye for this, which seems like an aggressive jab at Patriarch Namgon. In any case, they continue the conversation until finally Gun announces that the proposed target to become the enemy is not just one person, but a massive organization. It is said that there is a force that makes dozens of commoners disappear from the market, and that secretly commanded the Blue Wolf assassin group. This is a force that buried 800 workers without leaving a single trace. A clan that seeks to conjure the sword of death through the martial arts world of the orthodox path. This is the Mayong family of the 9 provinces. As the decision is made, the warriors under Chun's command approach the place they will attack. And inside the carriage, the patriarch continues his training to prepare for what's to come. Chun made each of the swords of death learn one of the 4 great divine techniques, both the divine skill of the turtle spirit and that of Thailand, the divine dragon, or the divine phoenix. All of these were mastered, and most encouraging was that Chun felt so strong at this moment that he could take down these swords of death on his own. Moreover, the patriarch wonders if there is a stage beyond mastery, because the key of the divine phoenix continues to evolve. And at this level, he believes he could crush all the great clans with insane ease. Then he can't hold back his laughter, which can be heard from outside the carriage. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues riding at high speed to reach his clan, and along with him are both his subordinates and the heir of the beggar's sect. Next to the hero, Dokseng reports that Patriarch Mayong left through the south gate yesterday, riding with his troops, which the hero remarks as an attempt to silence them. Since Chun went to see his father directly, they are trying to eliminate them before their misdeeds are exposed to the Alliance. Moreover, the protagonist can sense the Patriarch's desire to test the fake martial art of the 4 gods. In any case, the problem is time, and he wonders whether they can make up for the one-day difference. Still, the protagonist doesn't give up, but instead splits off, asking Dokseng to follow the Blue Operation Squad while he faces Chun, which obviously sends the beggar into a panic once again. But as always, our hero doesn't stop to listen. Until nightfall, the hero keeps hurrying, and once he gets close enough, he dismounts to continue on foot. For at that moment, the image of Chun is already making him uneasy, so using all this power to increase his speed, Hojong charges toward Patriarch Mayong. By morning, after a few more hours of travel, they finally see the sign indicating Yan territory. With that, the horses keep running at full speed, guided by the warriors guarding the Patriarch. Until suddenly, one of the soldiers notices something and asks everyone to stop. Then, as something approaches in front of them, they still try to understand what it is. But when they realize it's an axe, it's already too late because most of them are cut down by the weapon. And behind it is our hero, who finally manages to arrive at the scene thanks to the unity of the beggars. Because when they said they knew shortcuts through all the general plains, it wasn't an exaggeration. In any case, Hojong asks where Chun is. But of course, one of the soldiers first asks who the boy is. However, at that same moment, he realizes what the giant axe and the white robe mean. Even so, he believes it's impossible that those 3 brothers lost so easily. But at that moment, the protagonist was already advancing, preventing the conversation from going on. He asks if the warrior thought it would be so easy to enter his clan, and showing a bit of his power, he declares that those with the surname Mayong will not be allowed to set foot in Yan. In response, that guy from the mine appears again, now introducing himself as General Jokering. And in his position as commander, he orders his subordinates to finish off that arrogant insect. However, even after giving the order, he also decides to start the battle and charges forward, quickly using the Kilin Cloud Step. This is a new body technique, and as he approaches, he also uses the Kilin Blood Claw. But our hero made a precise movement with his axe, and even without understanding anything, the general's life had already come to an end. Thus, Hojong criticizes the deceased, saying that if you're going to make a modification, you should at least put some energy into it. On the other hand, another warrior can hardly believe what he's seen and shouts for the 54 swords to unleash their divine abilities. Right in front of the hero, the powers start being released, and he thinks of it as a banquet of false arts. In any case, the warriors are confident they will tear the protagonist to pieces, and beginning to tremble from exhaustion, the hero himself believes he may have rushed. So he prefers to focus his attention on the carriage where the patriarch is, and he charges, leaping over everyone to then eliminate them one by one, aiming to finish as quickly as possible. As the battle goes on, the carriage begins to burn because inside, Chun continues training to reach an even higher level. Thus, with several strikes, the warriors continue being eliminated by the protagonist, and others end up just being knocked out with physical blows that also defeat the martial artists. Faced with this, what seems to be the chief questions whether his men are holding back their abilities, and he himself throws one of his partners at the hero, since that one possesses the Turtle Spirit Shell ability. However, with just one strike, the protagonist manages to defeat the reinforced warrior. Then the leader tries to understand what is happening, wondering if his divine ability has somehow weakened. Amid the blows, though, the protagonist notices that the internal energies are mixing. He had already been wondering why he was feeling unstable, so another warrior tried to use that as an opportunity. But he was also defeated, yet the techniques of the four divine beasts were devouring the false techniques. Thus, the hero continues fighting until this time the leader prepares the dragon's cutting sword, drawing Hojang's attention. While the carriage boils in flames, the warrior charges toward the protagonist, and an explosion occurs from the clash of powers. But Hojang dodges by jumping behind him and heading for the carriage, because from the start, the boy knew the one he should strike was actually Chun. But just at the moment of impact, the patriarch awakens, responding with a massive pillar of flames. The very moment the hero sees it, the explosion covers the entire vicinity, managing to burn both Hojang and the ally. Thus, the fire begins to spread through the forest, and after struggling, our hero manages to get away. Then, amid the wreckage of the carriage and within that blazing fire, the patriarch of the Manhwa clan begins to appear. And just his footsteps release an unbelievable fire energy throughout the area. Because now Manhwa Chun is mastering the energy of the Crimson Bird. Faced with this, the hero wonders if he has perfected the false technique of the Crimson Bird. But he soon realizes it's not just imperfection, because the patriarch has been completely consumed by the energy, until his internal power exceeded the capacity of his own body. Therefore, at this moment, Manhwa is truly corrupted by the god of the Thunder Fire Sword. After introducing himself, the patriarch comments that he can no longer stand by watching. Then with one movement, he simply starts cutting down his own allies, making the leader of the subordinates unable to understand the reason behind it. However, Chun makes a point of explaining that he was foolish to think he could conquer the world with weaklings like them who struggle against a rookie. Thus, the patriarch's arrogance makes him believe that he is enough on his own. But to the hero, this is not something someone who hid behind subordinates before should be saying. In any case, Hojang is happy that Chun has finally appeared, and the patriarch realizes who the boy is. Then he comments that Hojang must really be desperate to die. But still without any fear, our hero simply asks if they really need to keep talking, because he is sure he will finish Chun off easily. In this case, completely consumed by rage, the patriarch says they'll see who's right after he burns him. In the end, with the two standing face to face, a moment Hojang had been waiting for finally arrives. Because of that, the memories of what happened to his father come back to the boy's mind. But today, Hojang is determined to end this old grudge, and even though his father knew nothing, the hero will avenge him for his last life. Besides him, the protagonist also couldn't forget what his younger brother went through. So the boy sincerely apologizes for leaving so cowardly, and to make up for it, he promises that every tear he shed will be honored. Thus, with nothing left to regret from his past, the protagonist stands up, this time with the expression of someone determined to defeat his enemy. All of the hero's fury is converted into energy that is released, startling Chun. And wanting even more than that, Hojang calls for the patriarch to come try attacking him, which deeply irritates him. With each on one side of the battlefield, the difference in their auras becomes clear. Hojang begins to calm his mind and focus until a single drop of sweat can be seen taking several seconds to fall. But the moment it drops, it sounds like a signal for the two to fight. Hojang is the first to charge, but the patriarch of the Manhwa clan doesn't fall behind. Then, as fast as lightning, the two clash in their first attack, creating a devastating pressure shock. Right after, Chun manages to strike again before the hero, forcing him to defend. And seizing that opportunity, the patriarch charges forward with a look of confidence at Hojang, who is still out of position. However, the hero manages to stay in the fight and immediately rushes at Chun to counterattack. Faced with this, the patriarch needs to change the direction of his attack, but now Hojang is able to dodge. Little by little, Chun realizes his opponent is getting faster as he loses ground in the fight, and so the patriarch begins to be pressured both by the axe and by fist techniques that easily send him flying backward. Despite all this training until now, Chun can't understand how this is possible. But invoking the aura of the White Tiger, the hero tells the patriarch to get up, because if he falls from just this, he'll be torn to pieces. The Southern Manhwa flame refining art is an incomparable martial art that made this clan the strongest of the 9 provinces. However, the average lifespan of its users was around 50 years, which also happened with the patriarchs, who ended up dying young. Manhwa Chun, for his part, turned 50 the day before and lived each day anxiously, wondering when his time would come. It was then that the martial arts left behind by the 4 great ancestors were discovered. The divine phoenix art was truly the pinnacle of Yang Qi, and Chun could barely contain his joy at the feeling of vitality. But then the results he achieved with it did not last as expected, because the last of the energy from the southern Mayang flame refining art inside his 8 extra meridians was about to disappear. Noticing all this, the protagonist obviously strikes at every opening that appears, until at a certain moment while repositioning, the patriarch drives his sword into the ground due to a pain in his chest. This was actually the false key of the Crimson Bird trying to invade Chun's upper dantian. Normally, the technique of the 4 guardian gods must be balanced with other energies, however, if only that Yang Qi reaches the dantian, he will die. In any case, it's not like the protagonist cared much about it, especially since that would actually be a good path to follow. So before the final blow, the leader approaches to help the Lord even after being betrayed. But something like that wasn't necessary because another explosion of fire energy occurred, affecting the warrior and even our hero, who was the only one within the explosion's range not to be swept away like the ground itself. With a bit more composure, the protagonist realizes that the surface point of the 12 divine northern walls is boiling. And of course, Hojong's danger instincts are triggered when Chun stands up. Now reinvigorated once again, the patriarch hopes the boy enjoyed his little taste of happiness thinking he could defeat him. Hojong in turn comments that he's actually glad Chun is alive because he wouldn't be satisfied ending it with his own hands otherwise. And precisely because of that, he asks Chun to come at him already without wasting his time. But what the protagonist didn't expect was that the patriarch's speed would increase so much, along with his immense strength, which also made it harder to counter the attacks. Regardless, Hojong responds with the Tiger King's 9 lightning strikes, but Chun blocks it with the flaming phoenix hand, being the first attack that actually makes the protagonist feel pain. Without further delay, the patriarch prepares the final blow. Unfortunately, the hero's turtle barrier defends and reflects it. Hojong tries to charge once again, but his opponent simply disappears, and by the time he is found, Chun is already on the right side, ready to use the phoenix charge. Luckily, once again, the hero dodges it and manages to reposition himself, but he seems barely able to stand. Because of that, Chun advances mercilessly to finish off the young master of the Yan clan. And even though the protagonist defends himself with his barrier, it is shattered by the patriarch's attack. Finally, Hojong is struck by a powerful vertical slash that creates a pillar of flames from the ground to the sky. Thus, the protagonist falls to his knees, unable to believe that the 4 guardian gods' technique lost to a cheap imitation. Amidst all that fire, Duxing finally arrives at the scene along with Chio Kyung, and the investigator comments that there's no way to tell how this will end. In any case, he reports that the entire noble Jumgang family is already prepared. Therefore, the time has come to interfere and get rid of the patriarch once and for all. However, just as they're about to help, someone else appears to say Chio Kyung cannot do that. It's the leader of the Blue Squad, Shinmo. If they intervene now, they'll definitely be caught in the chaos, and subduing the survivors at the end was the task given by the young master. Therefore, even now, the leader remains patient. Chio Kyung, however, argues that the protagonist will be in danger if they wait any longer, so Duxing reminds him that Hojong said he would win. But even wanting to believe, the beggar isn't sure it will be possible. In the past, before they said goodbye, Hojong said something confusing because he claimed that those weaker than Chun would be a bigger problem than him. But since the protagonist trusted the beggar, he also asked that some hope be placed in him. Back in the present, Chio Kyung believes the hero won't be able to win without help. And even the beggar thinks the same, feeling a bit sad about it. Because, faced with the hero's current state, he wonders if he can really believe in a victory. For a while, the protagonist stays collapsed on the ground, but suddenly, his hands move and the bleeding stops. Then he stands before the patriarch, leaving him very confused. Now his wounds are cauterized, which makes the situation much better. Chun, in turn, wastes no time attacking and praises how tough the protagonist is, but tells him not to worry because it will be over soon. Thus, Chun continues attacking mercilessly, and unfortunately, the protagonist doesn't even know why he's still holding on. Because despite everything, he's already too occupied just trying to defend when once again another attack hits him. Suddenly, everything goes dark and the hero remembers the moment he fought his father. A martial art that encompassed everything was what defined Yan, but then something appeared asking the Black Emperor what defined him, making the boy reflect. Because of that, his memories also go to the fight with Chai San, where the warrior said that a fighter couldn't depend on a few techniques as what mattered most was effort. Even now, Chai San attacked the hero again, pressing him with the question of whether his martial arts were nothing more than techniques. So already very irritated with all of it, the hero finished him off like the last time. Even so, he didn't know what they expected him to do, but that's when his father appeared, telling him not to be impatient. Because the boy's martial techniques were of the furious and dominating type, just like the book he had given him long ago. Therefore, Hojong begins to understand that running to defend himself is not a martial art of his. And more than that, he tries to search his mind for what he learned in this latest life to finally counter the patriarch's attacks again. This time, the hero uses the counterattack palm of the reverse dragon palm, and determined to continue, unleashes his clean, unique strike. All of these were abilities specifically his, but even while being thrown far away, Chun comments that he hopes the boy doesn't think those pathetic attacks will work on him. The martial arts that define the protagonist are of dominating fury, so he wonders what martial art is in his own conception. Meanwhile, Chun jumps high into the air and prepares his final strike, the crossblade of the Flying Phoenix. But Hojong sees all of this while still wondering whether his individuality is meant to block or counterattack. However, within seconds, he denies both possibilities, finally understanding that, to him, martial arts are meant to completely annihilate all enemies. Consumed by fury, Mayong charges like a true berserker, releasing a massive wave of firepower, which extends all the way to Dukseng and Cheol-kyung, who, even though they are powerful, feel the pressure. So I'm not seeing the hero nearby. Chun laughs loudly, thinking he vaporized him from the face of the earth. But he also feels a bit disappointed not to witness it happen with his own eyes. However, he gets startled when he hears someone say that his martial arts are total combat techniques, to annihilate those who were already annihilated through instant extermination. Now that is something that defines the Black Emperor and eldest son of the Yan clan of the Green Mountain, something that truly represents the martial arts of Yan Hojong.